Ooh, shiitake mushrooms. It's episode 13 of the Gaming Memories podcast where I, Roboclip the Blessed Beatmaker, your friendly neighborhood prophecy and revelator, the only guy, and it has to be a guy, mind you, you filthy women. Just kidding. I don't really think that. The gods told me to say that. The only guy that can talk to the gods in behalf of you. So if you want to communicate with the great unknown, the gods actually know what to do with your life, know how to live your life, basically you got to talk to me because I'm the only one that has all of the answers. And on top of that, I'm going to start up a Patreon or Patreon, however you say that. And I want you, heathen, to pay me 10% of your income before taxes. Actually, if you really want blessings, what you should do is pay me 10% on how much money you actually want to make. And for my extra faithful subscribers, I'll throw in some holy water that you can sprinkle on your bills and your debt will magically go away. Episode 13, we have a great guest, Josh Moody. I know this guy because you guys aren't paying enough to the gaming gods, the one true gaming podcast. I have to work like a dirty heathen. Anyway, I do a lot of marketing, and Josh is probably the single most influential person, second, he's up there. One of the most influential people that taught me everything I know about marketing online and how to make money online. And he is a bona fide genius. He is like masterclass at marketing. He gets flown around to speak at marketing conferences, big fancy awards, big fancy job titles, big fancy everything essentially. Huge accounts, made huge sales, landed huge clients. Like the dude is an absolute digital marketing rock star. So if you're interested in any of that stuff, definitely check him out. I will post links to his applicable shit in the podcast description. But Josh also likes to play video games and he's really smart. So it ended up being a fantastic conversation. I had a great time. I hope you guys have a good time. Make sure to check him out. Again, the link's in the description. And also remember, spread the love. Spread the good news of the Gaming Memories Gospel. And you will be blessed because Miyamoto the Father, Kojima the Son, and Carmack the Holy Ghost have revealed to me through revelation on how to make the best and the greatest gaming podcast on planet Earth. And I'm doing that right now by interviewing people like Josh about their favorite gaming memories growing up. Had a fantastic time. I say these things in the name of the Father, Miyamoto, the Son, Kojima, and Carmack, the Holy Ghost. Enjoy the show. Amen, folks. Welcome to the podcast. I will do intros for this later, but how do you want me to introduce you?
Honestly, however you want to, man. You can go as extravagant or as just the raw shit, man. Doesn't matter.
All right. Well, here we are with Josh Moody. Welcome to the podcast. Josh Moody is basically, for those of you who know, I do a lot of marketing as my day job. I turn clicks into checks. I sell leads. And Josh is basically my guru that taught me, you and Nils basically taught me most of what I know, and my current business partner. The three of you are like the holy trifecta of marketing knowledge in my life. So you know how to do some stuff on the internet is what I heard.
That is quite the intro. That is good company to be with. So
yeah, I don't know if you're the Father, the Son, or the Holy Ghost, but you're definitely one of them.
It's one and the same is what I hear.
Well, it depends. Depends on who you ask.
It depends on who you ask, I guess.
But yeah, welcome to the podcast. Josh is in town from Texas.
Yep.
On a work vacation.
Yep.
And I stole him away into the podcast studio. And we're going to talk about some video games. But the reason you should care about what Josh has to say is he's a smart dude.
Well, I appreciate that. I'll do my best to make it sound coherent.
Yeah.
And we'll talk some video games.
So, what are you playing right now?
Man, right now it's a lot of stupid phone games and a lot of kids games.
No. What are you playing on the phone?
Honestly, a lot of stupid kid games, man. A lot of that is just keeping my kids happy. But when it's not that, then it's typically GTA 5.
You still playing Grand Theft Auto 5?
I still play GTA 5. It's like it's an escape, you know?
Yeah.
It's stepping outside of my problems, my world, and just getting into the land of chaos.
Are you doing single player or the online?
Mainly online.
Mainly online.
Mainly just wreaking havoc.
They have made so much money on the online component of that game.
So much.
It's insane. The last time I checked, I think it was in the billions of dollars that they have made. And a great gaming memory, actually, I think it's a great way to introduce you. So when I worked at the agency where I met Josh, I worked for the smaller, basically the not as cool team. And then I was doing some stuff on the side. He reached out, asked me a couple questions like, hey, you're doing some lead gen on the side. You're doing some extracurricular studying. I'd like you on my team. And for those who don't know, Josh was basically the team captain of the team that made the most money in the whole company. And I got brought up to his team. And the company had this buffer system or this idea, the way they do bonuses. And I had never gotten a bonus in like a year and a half, 2 years. And the first bonus time came around. And this is how I knew that we were going to be friends and you're going to be a good boss. Is you were like, hey, we could do bonuses, but you have to pay extra in taxes, I guess, for bonuses. They take more out. So you said we could give you money, or we could give you money for a computer, and you can get basically more bang for your buck if you used it to build a computer because it's like gift tasks or something. It's less than the bonus tax.
Totally.
I'm like, yeah, let's build a PC. So the whole team got a budget. We all nerded out on PC part picker for weeks. I'm going to get this card. I'm going to get this case. I'm going to get this SSD. And I hadn't built a PC in years and years and years. And I think no one had really built a PC in a long time. So we all get our budget. We end up, after much trials and tribulation, we all decide. You and I got pretty much the same build.
It's exactly.
It's almost this. Yeah, I had
the same thing.
Almost the exact same builds. I know we got the same case, right?
Oh yeah, same case, same graphics
Mobo.
card. I mean, you upgraded now, but man, we had the same, pretty much everything.
Almost the same build. Neil's got the mini ATX. Box case. Then I forgot Foss got a different case than everybody else.
He wanted a special weird cube.
Yeah.
But I mean, some people wanted monitors. I think that was Nils' thing, is he took money off some of the other parts so that he could build
Got a monitor.
Get a monitor or something. But
and we all went after hours into the office, and it took us forever to build those PCs.
Yes.
We started at I want to say 4 in the afternoon.
Yep.
It was 2 a.m.
Yep.
And we're all tired and sweaty and frustrated and just running. I don't even remember what problems, but I remember just being I want this to be over. I just want my PC to work.
Yep.
And then somehow we all got them to work. And it's the PC this was 5-6 years ago. I'm still using that PC. Yes, I've upgraded the graphics card, but that's it. I haven't updated the CPU. I haven't upgraded the RAM. I started out with, that's got 32, or I think it's got 64 gigs of RAM. I went all out from the very beginning. But just do you still have this same build, no upgrades?
Yeah, I've not upgraded it yet. It still runs everything that I could ever want and more. And I mean, when we did that, I think we put in about $3,000 a pop, wasn't it? It was something like $3,000 up for parts and for everything. So it was a good build.
Yeah, I want to say 2,700. Something like that.
There was a little bit of money that I think that we threw in there to cover taxes, so you didn't get blindsided later or something. So I rounded out to something like that. So yeah, it was a lot in parts. That's
how you know have a good boss. If he says, hey, he or she, sorry, I'm not sexist, women can be bosses too. If someone asks you, do you want money or do you want to build a gangster PC? You're at the right company and you're on the right team. Yeah, and that's how. And then as a team activities, we'd play GTA 5.
Right, but see, that was part of the ploy. That was part of it, right? Because that was easier to get buy off internally. Because people were like, what are these people doing? It's hey, it's a team activity. Don't worry, it's a team activity. We're all gonna do it. We're all gonna play together. But it's funny because we actually did. And then the one person on the team just wanted a freaking dope ass Mac, right? So yeah, man, it was a good way to justify. But yeah, we played a lot. We spent a lot of GTA 5, and it's been good times, man.
So you're still playing to this day.
Oh yeah, man, I still play to this day. I had for a time there. I had a little bit squishy graphics card. For some wasn't working, but jiggled
it's the
and
980 Ti is what we got.
Yeah, 980 Ti.
It's still a really good card.
Yeah, man, it's great. I need to upgrade my monitor so I can play on 4K because my monitor I still have 1080p. So I mean, I could blaze on 1080p all day long. So pretty much any game. So all day. So, but yeah, man, GTA. That's what takes me back. Back to the day. I remember back in high school specifically. There That's what I cut my teeth on. I would listen. I would come home from school. I would turn on Rise Against really loud, and I would just play GTA.
That's interesting because that's something that's come up in a couple other podcasts is memories. Oftentimes you'll connect a game and whatever music you're listening to because our generation, you're born, say, 83, 85?
89.
So you're younger than me, yeah.
Yeah, a little bit younger.
But either way, you still grew up having albums and CDs,
Totally.
no streaming, so you would end up becoming intimately familiar. And I had the same thing where I connect certain games like Final Fantasy X I got for Christmas at the same time that I got Incubus Morning View. And so I played that whole game on mute, blasting Incubus Morning View through the whole game. And a lot of people have memories like that. Hey, I connect this game to this album, and I would put those two together.
Yeah.
So you were into Rise Against.
Yeah, man. So it was always like Rise Against or, I mean, all sorts of other music. But the funny thing about it, and this is probably going to make me sound like a terrible human, but I mean, back in those days, you remember LimeWire?
Yes.
So it's like whatever you want. Like you just get on LimeWire, you download your music for the day or for however long.
It doesn't
long
make you
and
a terrible human. We all did it.
We all did it, right?
Before LimeWire, it was the the advent. So first you could burn CDs, and then I remember learning, oh, you can burn a burned CD. At first, I didn't think you could do that.
Yeah.
So I went from having like your small CD collection in your case in your car, and then all of a sudden I had thousands of CDs because everyone would just get together, we'd swap CDs.
Yep.
And I had one of those big 6x6 cases in the backseat of my little Toyota Tercel, thousands of CDs.
Yep.
But you still had I still sometimes miss the magic of like taking a CD in and out and having that CD.
Yeah.
And having the album. I mean, I do like streaming because now I have playlists that are curated and I basically never listen to music I don't like. But I don't know the music I listen to.
Yeah.
I'll put it on a playlist and be like, oh, I like that song. I don't know the song name. I don't know the artist name.
Yep.
But I know the song. I couldn't tell you who it is.
Totally.
And that's, yeah.
There's so much gratification that comes with that, though. I remember one of my first albums was Weezer's Blue album. And I remember just the gratification of popping that sucker in your CD player, listening from A to Z, and just every song is good, and you just bliss, But I agree, man. Streaming kind of takes that away a little bit.
A little bit.
A little bit.
You trade the magic for just unlimited options. And I have playlists for every mood. If I want heavy, metal, prog, I have a playlist, and it's all curated. And the great thing about Spotify is the more you add to your playlist, the better the recommendation engine gets. And now it's to the point, like, I want some new music. I'll just open a playlist, scroll down to the bottom of the playlist. It'll have recommended songs, and I'll start to just preview them. I want to say, like, it's a high percentage for new music for me is like 25 to 30% of the tracks. I'm like, oh, I think I should add that to the playlist. Then it just gets better and better and better. The flip side of that is I don't know any of the song names. I don't know any of the artist names. But anytime, whatever mood I want, put the playlist on, hit shuffle. I'm good to go.
So good, man.
It is pretty nice.
So good. And it's so nice when you find a good station like that you've kind of primed and it's like autofilling that pairs well with a specific game. So I remember, like, specifically speaking to pairing that with games, did you ever play Prince of Persia back in the day?
Oh, yeah. Which one?
So,
the old school computer one?
So I started on the old school computer one, but specifically the one that I'm thinking of right now is Prince of Persia 2, Warrior Within.
Oh, so Sands of Time. And then Warrior Within.
Played the hell out of Sands of Time. It was great. And then Warrior Within went dark, right? I don't know if you remember that, but Sands of Time was like a little more powder puff. It was teen.
Yes.
Like, it was broader audience. And then Warrior Within went hard. Like, you're cutting people's heads off and doing crazy stuff. So I remember at that time I would listen to Godsmack. I would listen to specifically I Stand Alone.
I Stand Alone.
Yeah. And so, like, the DACA's coming at you. It's like freaking coming. And it's like, I stand alone. And you're just like, I could do this.
I forgot about Godsmack. That's like the poor man's Disturbed.
Yeah.
Almost,
totally.
Sort of the same vein.
Totally.
Yeah.
It's just.
I actually like, and the name Godsmack.
So it's just in your
just
face,
hits
right?
hard.
Yeah.
Godsmack.
Yep. So, man, I remember pairing those, and that was a good combo. You get fired up. Just like Rise Against, great combo for GTA, right? When you're just wreaking havoc.
Because GTA is a little, especially, I don't know, I know you grew up LDS. Were your parents okay with GTA, or were they not aware of...
No. So, funny. Okay, so
that's
funny.
A no.
But that's a hard no. So... what I would do back in the day, I had a lot of like rated E games and a lot of rated T games, and I would cut out the T's or the E's, and I would slip it on, because you remember those cases, right? So you would open like a PlayStation case, and you would bend it back, and the plastic would come out, and then you could slide the case cover off. So I'd slide that off, and I would glue it on, and I would slip it back in.
You'd put fake ratings on your games.
I would put fake ratings, dude.
Wow.
Because when they would look, like if they would look at it, they would just be like, "Oh, rated T." Like that's no problem, right? I mean, the internet was just like coming up, right? We had dial up in it, but it was hard, like. And they wouldn't like dig deeper and be like, hey, this game, there was no like parental control or blogs that talk about that shit. So it was like, hey, this game's rated E for everyone. But I mean, if you look at the picture, you take 2 seconds, it's like a dude with a sword, like bloody swords and stuff.
That's crafty though. That's really crafty. I wish I would have thought of that, because my parents, they started getting aware. I've told this a couple of times on the podcast. We'll do a short version. Do you remember a game on Sega called Streets of Rage?
Oh, vaguely. Vaguely.
It's like a beat 'em up. Like, did you play Final Fight ever?
A little bit. I never had a Sega Genesis, so
Did you play the Simpsons arcade game?
Oh, tons.
So it's just kind of side scroller. You can move up and down. It's a beat 'em up game.
Got it.
I had the first two, Streets of Rage 1 and 2, and those games came out before the ESRB rating system came out. Streets of Rage 3 came out, and by that time the ESRB had come out, and I was still pretty young, and I wanted to rent it, and I grabbed it to take it. My mom was like, they were already starting to be a little bit more aware because of the rated R movie rule in LDS culture.
Totally.
And they're like, okay, well, what's the equivalent for video games? And then they knew about the ESRB. I remember my mom saying, I'm glad that they rolled this out, because I've never really known what games you should really get or not. And I wanted to rent Streets of Rage 3, but it was rated teen, and I was like 12. It's 13 above. And she's like, no. And I threw a fit, and I was like, I already own the first 2 games. Mm-hmm. Like, I've already been playing. This is just a sequel. In my mind, that was justification to be able to play the third one. In her mind, like, oh, great, I'll just take those 2 games away.
Oh, crap. It backfired?
It backfired.
Oh, man.
And if I would have been smart enough to pull your crafty little trick... So did you like print? Did you have a printer at home? How did you make the fake label?
I would cut them off of other games. Oh. So I literally would get like Mario Kart, and I would just cut it out and then just throw that in. Because like they would see Mario Kart and they wouldn't be like, I wonder what rating this is. It's like cartoons and stuff. Yeah, they know, right? So I would just clip it out of other games. So it works.
Genius.
It works super well. You know what's funny about that though is the hardest part about the whole damn scheme was acquiring the game, right? Because they won't sell it. If it's an M-rated game, they won't sell it to someone under 18, right? I think it was 18 or 17.
If it's MA.
If it's MA, right? So I remember wanting so badly. We were going on a road trip, right? And I would play on my laptop. I got this little laptop, and I was probably 16 at the time, 15 or 16, and I wanted to play Fable so bad. Did you ever play Fable?
Was that MA or teen?
So it was MA back in the day, for sure.
That's crazy that was MA.
100%.
That's true, because you could like flirt with people and sleep with people.
Yeah. 100% it was MA, because I remember, because I couldn't buy it. I tried to buy it. And I remember I went to like Walmart or like some game store, and they were like, yeah, like, can I see ID? 'Cause obviously they know that I'm not old enough.
Yeah.
And they're like, no, you can't buy this. And I was like so defeated. So I remember the day before this trip, this big road trip, right? The day before, I was desperate. And so I walked down to my friend's house, who was 2 years older than me, and he could buy it. And I knew he could buy it.
Yeah.
But he had just barely turned. And so I was like, hey, I go in and knocked on his door, and I was like, hey, man, I know this is short notice. Can you drive me down to, I swear it was Walmart at the time. I was like, can you drive me down and can you buy a game for me? Like, shameful. But he was so cool. He was like, yep, let's do it, man.
Yeah.
So he went and bought me Fable. I did the whole crafty trick. It worked out great. Played Fable the entire road trip, man. It was incredible.
Nice. Hey, let's, I'm going to move this so you don't kick it. Audio fix. Take a drink. That way we're not kicking it and getting sound. And your parents, I guess they weren't paying. Fable doesn't look too offensive if you just kind of look over and see, because it has a little bit of a cartoony aesthetic.
Yeah, totally.
Even though so that game, I don't know. It sounds like you're excited for that game. How much of the pregame hype you bought into?
All of it.
A lot. So
all of it.
Do you remember when Peter Monulux? I don't know how to say. Sorry, Peter. I don't know how to say your last name. The head guy at Lionhead Studios that developed Fable. He is notorious for sort of over-promising and under-delivering.
Okay.
Like really, really excited. And I remember when they were developing Fable, it was like, this is going to be a true open world where you can do anything. And one of the examples was, if you plant a seed anywhere when you're the child, later in the game when you're adult, that seed will be a tree and it'll all be connected. All your choices that you make as a child. And that kind of played true, but not in the way that, at least the way that everyone thought it was going to be. It was like No Man's Sky fiasco before No Man's Sky.
Yep, totally.
And so I loved that game when it came out, but it wasn't quite as open world as I thought. However, I did like to mess around with, you could kill anybody, you could flirt with anybody. So I mentioned this on the past podcast. This may make me sound like a psychopath, but I wanted to see where the game would break. So I remember going into one of the villages mid-game. I was powerful enough to kill the guards, and I killed everyone in the village, like just desecrated the village, and I wanted to see if they'd come back. And they didn't come back. Like, I went and saved the game, and they didn't come back. I'm like, okay, but there was it doesn't let you kill any NPCs that would hamper the story. Right? But you can kill everybody else.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, okay, but I wonder if they'll remember. So I went to if the player or the NPCs that aren't crucial, that if I kill everybody, will they remember I'm the one that killed everybody? If I go play another mission, reset the game, and come back. And so I went to another village, I massacred everyone, and I killed this woman's family. And then I did a couple of missions, and I came back, and she was like the last one in the village, like this lone person in the village.
Okay.
Then I flirted with her and got her to marry me. And she did not remember that I was the one that killed her family. So it was like, you could see where the game started to break down. It didn't actually make sense.
Yeah.
But I thought it was cool that you could play around with a game like that. It was the first game I remember really being able to Grand Theft Auto had come out, but was Grand Theft Auto 3 before Fable? I think it was.
It had to have been.
Had to have been. So Grand Theft Auto 3 was a PS2 game. Fable was Xbox. Xbox came out after PS. Yeah. They were close, though.
They would have been close.
Because Grand Theft Auto 3 was not a launch PS2 game. I think PS2 had been out for a few years.
Totally. Because I got it with the Slim. The PS2 Slim.
The Slim.
Which was later.
Yeah.
Right. It wasn't as bulky or bricky. But, man, that game, Fable, was so good. And I remember did you ever use a bow on that?
Yes.
I mean, man, that, for some reason, it was so smooth and you could just get hit.
Were you playing on a trackpad?
No, so I'd have a mouse. Man, I had a whole getup. I had my laptop, and then I had a mouse pad right here.
On your leg?
on my leg or on the seat, and then I just had this. I had a million cords. Man,
plugged into the AC adapter in the car.
Well, I had to get an inverter, plug it into the inverter, plug that into the
So you had
AC
consoles
adapter.
and a PC. You were PC gaming as well early on.
A little bit. So my computer was kind of shit. So I had to scale down hard because it was just a laptop from back in the day. So I had to scale things down pretty hard. But the majority of gaming happened on consoles.
Nice.
So,
what's the very first video game you ever remember seeing?
Man, the very, very first. So I'm not going to remember the name, but I remember the emotion. I remember the game. It was this really, really early baseball game on NES. That was the very first game.
There's a couple baseball games that's coming to mind on NES. Something. Anyway, we won't spend time. I think I know what you're talking about. There was definitely one baseball game that most people remember. I want to say it's something All Stars.
Yeah.
Or is it RBI? There was
I can't
RBI
remember, dude.
as well.
I was so young though. I would have not known.
Was it your console or did you see it at a friend's house?
It was my dad. So my dad bought one and we played that, and those were good memories. And then we also had Super Mario Brothers. Those were the formative games, like Super Mario Brothers 3.
Yes, that's a big one for a lot of people.
Best game ever made. It was so good. At least for growing up and just being raised on that. So good.
So your dad was kind of into gaming?
So kind of like he wasn't really into gaming, but he really liked sports. And so I think that was the way to be like, hey, well, maybe this is a cool thing, right? I mean, they grew up playing not grew up, but like they played a lot of Pong and Miss Pac-Man. And so they were like, oh yeah, this is a cool thing. We should get this thing. So those were the first games. But then what happened was my love for playing games outpaced theirs.
Yes.
Obviously. And so I remember pretty soon after, I had some pretty good friends that played a lot of games. And so I'd always go over to their house and play games. But I remember specifically, do you remember? So Donkey Kong Country came out, but that was for Super Nintendo.
Yes.
But there was a Donkey Kong game on NES.
Yes.
Right? And so I remember playing Donkey Kong at friends' houses, and then I would come home and I'd be like, Mom and Dad, I want to play Donkey Kong. Like, I want to get Donkey Kong. And so we would go down to the video store, and we try to rent it. And they're like, oh, I just have this Donkey Kong. And I was just like, nope, that's not it. I'm not playing this shit. Like,
but it was the actual.
But it was the original Donkey Kong throwing barrels.
So you had
'Cause I never had a
seen
Super
Country, and
Yep.
you went and got the old school version, and you
school
were not
one.
impressed.
I was like, bro, this is not Donkey Kong.
Yeah.
This is some weird like.
So you had a few
Frankenstein.
memories from NES, but the first game that really stands out to you is Donkey Kong Country on Super Nintendo.
Probably one of the biggest for sure.
Yeah.
Donkey Kong Country on Super Nintendo was, man, I played that so much, all day, every day.
That's a big one. A lot of people have brought it up, but I always say this, but I think it's noteworthy to say is that the graphics technology for that game was super cutting edge.
Mm-hmm.
They, long story short, Silicon Knights are rare, kind of one and the same back in the day. It was one of the first games, if not the first game, at least on consoles. They would use 3D renderings machines for movies.
Mm-hmm.
They would do 3D renders. They would convert them into 2D sprites, take the colors down because they only were allowed like 8 to 16 colors on Super Nintendo. And that's why it had that look, because it wasn't traditional sprite animation where someone was going through and animating each frame. They were basically doing 3D animation, running the animation, recording it as a 2D frame, taking the 60 frames or 30 frames a second down to like 12 frames a second, lowering the colors, and then importing those as the sprites. And that's why everything had that hyper realistic look for Super Nintendo. They had done similar things on consoles, like digitized, like Mortal Kombat was what they called digitized graphics, basically just taking pictures or videos of actual actors and then turning those into your sprite animations. And then you had traditional sprite animation, which would be like Mario, where someone just hand animated that. And Donkey Kong Country was the first one that I remember coming out, and that like PS1 had already come out, or was almost coming. I think it had come out, but it was this thing where like Super Nintendo's old, but it came out with this game that has better graphics than some of the PS1 games that are 2D because of this graphics technology. And that really put Rare or RAR on the map. Later, they went on to do, GoldenEye and Perfect Dark, and they became Banjo-Kazooie, yada, 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 yada. That game, that graphics technology was... Vector Man used it on the... I don't know if you remember that, on the Sega Genesis. That was
totally.
That was like the Genesis answer to Donkey Kong Country, which never became as big.
Yeah.
But Donkey Kong Country is a huge game. I never had a SNES, but I had a friend that had it. And I remember what I loved about that game was the overworld.
Yes.
And the secrets.
Yes.
As you would like get better things on levels, then like maybe a door would open, or you'd get this hovercraft and now you can go, and then you would find new secret levels. And the connection, because Super Mario World 3 had an overworld as well, but you had set paths. You could just like, where Donkey Kong Country, at least 2 and 3, you could actually walk around and it was more free moving overworld. And I something about like finding the secrets of the overworld motivated you to get the highest scores and do everything in the levels.
Yes.
And that, I think, for me, was what the magic of the game. We would sit and play for hours like, okay, how do we get behind that waterfall? There was no internet.
Yes.
Right? So you calling your friends asking, oh, you got to get this certain item in this level. You have to get all the letters on this level, get enough bananas. Then you got to take this item to the old man donkey, and then he gives you this item. Then you add that to your hovercraft, and you can jump over the waterfall, and there's a whole extra 10 levels over there, or something along the lines of that.
Totally.
Yeah.
It's funny. You bring up there's no internet, so you can't check that out, right?
Yeah.
So I remember Do you remember old Nintendo Power magazines?
Yes.
So I never had Nintendo Power or never had subscriptions, but this is the weirdest thing. But like I remember when we would go, like every once in a while we would take like loads of like garbage to the dump, right? Out in rural Payson, right? And I remember one time we went there and I found a box of Nintendo Power. Dude,
You found a treasure trove of Nintendo Powers.
Yeah, dude, I was scrappy as hell and I took them. And I was like, I'm taking these.
Of course you did. You're already swapping out ratings on games. You are super crafty.
So, dude, I remember that being, because that was your internet, that was your cheat sheet, right?
Yeah.
To find that stuff. And I remember then, like fast forward a little bit to the future, not super far. We were at some bookstore, and I remember seeing a game guide for Donkey Kong Country 2, Diddy's Kong Quest. And I remember, so I bought that. I still have that to this day, of like all the secrets, where they are with images, and it shows you all the behind the scenes, exactly like what you're talking about. And that was like the cheater's way to figure it out, right?
Yeah.
But man, good.
Is there anything else on NES that stands out to you that you remember?
Let's see, NES. Man, I played a lot of Mario, like Mario 1, like the original Mario, a lot of Mario Brothers 3. And I think Kirby. Tons of Kirby.
There was a Kirby on regular NES?
The original Kirby.
I must have missed that.
The original Kirby was on NES. And that game was incredible. It was super hard. Once you get to the very end stages, I've never beat it. I get to the very last part where there's this mage that you're fighting, but I can never beat it. So to this day, I have I can't let that go. Unfulfilled. I've never beat Kirby, the original.
I didn't have that with Kirby, but I had that with Castlevania. I could always get to death on Castle. My brother was the same way. I could get to death, but I couldn't beat death and get to Dracula.
Yeah.
And man, we've talked. Those games were so hard because when you die, you die. You start all the way over again. And there's a magic to that because you become so intimately familiar with the game.
Yes.
I mean, like some of those games, like the beginning of Castlevania, I can blast through the first, probably to this day if I picked it up. It would take me a couple minutes. All that muscle memory would come back, and I could probably blast through the first 3 or 4 levels because I played those hundreds of times.
Yeah.
And then it wasn't until the later levels where things started getting difficult.
Totally.
And I could see that. I did play Kirby on the Game Boy. I don't know. It must have been after the original. I didn't know there was a Kirby on the original NES.
Dude, it's good. Well, it's funny. So you asked what was the most recent game that I've played. And actually, now I'm thinking about it, it actually is like emulated games.
Okay.
From back when. Because I recently just played Donkey Kong Country again, back through as an adult. That was a different experience.
On an emulator?
On an emulator.
Using ZNES?
Yes, I believe
That's
so.
I think one of the,
I believe
the best one.
And then what I did is, so I got on Amazon and ordered 2 different SNES controllers, and then I ordered a GameCube controller that is USB. And so you can plug in and you can play. It feels.
You can plug a controller into your PC?
Yeah. Well, so these are made. So it's.
Oh, it's not an actual. It's made to look like it, but works
so
for
like
PC.
It feel like the form and function is
yeah.
exactly the same, and then you map it exactly the same via your emulator. But then you just plug in your USB.
Nice.
And you just play, and it feels the exact same. Obviously, is the exact same, right? But yeah, we just went through Donkey Kong Country again, but then also started playing the old school Kirby and some of those again, and then playing a lot of N64. That was the next big one.
When you sorry, make sure things are working. When you went Nintendo, Super Nintendo, 64. So you were just Nintendo straight through basically.
This is the inflection point. So I never had a Nintendo 64. I had an NES and I had an SNES, but I never had a Nintendo 64. My friend did. And so I would always go to his house to play that, but then I got a PlayStation. So I had the PlayStation.
That's my love.
I had the PlayStation 1.
Oh,
which
yes.
That's what opened up the world of gaming.
So that's when I'm the same way as I had a Genesis Nintendo growing up. My brothers played it more, and I have some memories similar with Nintendo. I'm a little bit older than you. a handful of games, but I was too young to have enough money to go rent my own games.
Yeah.
So I was basically at the mercy of whatever the family got. That's what I could play.
Yep.
A lot of them were too hard. Like Zelda was way too hard for me at 6 years old to figure out. But Mario 3 was like digestible. Mario 2, actually, I spent a lot of time because you could pick different characters and they had different. And I remember all the bosses were dudes that shoot eggs at you. And you had to jump on the eggs and pick them up and throw them back at them. Mario 2 is this weird like offshoot Mario. Most people hate it.
It was weird.
I liked it though.
Yeah.
I liked how floaty Luigi was, or the princess could like hover and you could go indoors, like open doors and go into different rooms. A lot of elements to Mario 2 that have never made it back into any other Mario game. Similar to Zelda 2 was side scroller and top down, and they kind of experimented. They never did that again with the Zelda game.
Yeah.
Anyway, then I had Genesis instead of SNES. And then I had PS1. And it wasn't till PS1, that's when I was a teenager. I started working at like 12 years old in the summers. I got a job doing like digging fences, building fences, doing sprinkler systems. Basically, guys who didn't want to pay people full wage. They would, a friend of a friend's dad, he would pick us up in the morning, have us do manual labor all day, buy us lunch, take us home. He'd pay me $100 at the end of the week.
Okay.
And I was working like 50, 60 hours, depending.
Jeez.
I was at least gone 60 hours. Sometimes we'd take breaks and go get lunch.
Sure.
But for me, $100 at 11, 12 years old that's one game every week.
Yep.
I had no other expenses. And so the PS1 for me is like, okay, I could get a ride to Blockbuster, I could get a ride to Walmart, go buy a game, and that's when I really started gaming. So the fact that I haven't really had anyone on yet that PS1, most people didn't have it. So
really?
For me, PS1 is like the glory days.
Man, let's talk PS1. Did you ever get discs in the mail, like promo discs?
Yeah, demo discs.
Demo discs.
Oh, yes.
You remember that? You remember, oh man, this is taking me back. Do you remember Pizza Hut did demo discs?
They had demo discs.
Yeah, you remember that crap?
I do remember the Pizza Hut one. I remember not PS1, but Chex Mix had its own game. The
Chex Quest.
Chex Quest.
Oh my hell, dude! I played Chex Quest so much.
Yeah, Chex Quest was like a Doom clone.
Okay, so get this. Imagine current day companies doing that level marketing.
That would be awesome.
Creating
actually.
Chex Quest, having demo discs with their pizza. Like they knew what was up.
Yeah,
they knew what was up.
That's true. I had kind of forgot about it until you brought it up. But yeah, Pizza Hut had demo discs. The demo disc I got for PS1. Well, when PS1 early launch, I think I got it like a year after launch. I can't remember. My parents got it for Christmas, and it came with a demo disc. I had 2 games, like WWE Raw, like it was like a 2D wrestling game.
Yeah.
And then I had a demo disc, and the demo disc had, I don't know if you had this demo disc, but it had a demo where it was just a whale floating in the ocean, and you could move the camera around. That was the whole demo.
No.
And then it had like one level from a bunch of different games.
Okay.
But then Pizza Hut, and there was another company that they came out with other demo discs with more modern demos. And it was almost like every year there'd be a new PlayStation demo disc, and you could get it at a bunch of different places. And I'm pretty sure Pizza Hut was one of them, because I do remember like asking my mom, like, we need to go to Pizza Hut to get a pizza because I want that disc.
Ulterior motive.
Yeah.
We need pizza, Mom.
We never got Pizza Hut. It wasn't our place to get pizza.
Yeah.
But they got our business for that one time.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Those demo discs, man, they changed the game. So I can't remember what games were on the Pizza Hut ones. Can you remember which like games or demos were on those?
So I get a little mixed up. The original demo discs, I think I had the first one, had Jumping Flash. It had the Whale demo. It had Battle Arena Toshiden, and a couple other. Then there was another demo disc that came out that I think was the Pizza Hut one much later, but it had a demo for Tony Hawk. That's the one I remember.
Okay.
It had the warehouse level, the first level of Tony Hawk.
Yes, it played Superman by Goldfinger.
Yes.
Remember that song?
Yeah. Yeah, Tony Hawk was the first game I remember that had licensed music.
Yeah.
That was a big deal.
Yeah. Oh, man. Every kid that played Tony Hawk Pro Skater 2 knows every song by heart.
That's what introduced me to Rage Against the Machine, was Tony Hawk.
Really?
Yeah.
Nice. Man, I don't remember necessarily what games were on the Pizza Hut demo discs, but I remember one day I came home from school And there was a demo disc sitting there, and I'm going to botch this name because I've never learned how to say it, but it's Legend of, I always call it Legend of Lega, but it's Legaia.
Oh, Legend of Gaia?
Legaia, yeah.
Yeah, it's an
I'm
RPG.
Sure.
Yeah.
Did you ever play that game?
Yes.
Any
JRPG on PS1 I've played.
Okay, so I found, talking to people, have either initially went down that path for their first, like, real RPG, or they went down the Final Fantasy path,
yeah.
Right? And I feel like most people went down the Final Fantasy.
Definitely more
I went
common.
down the other path.
So you played Legaia first.
That was the first RPG that I ever played, and it sucked me in so hard. And I remember you play that first world that Vaughn, the main character, is in, right? And you beat the Suru, and you get rid of him,
yes.
and you revive the Genesis tree, and then you get that first power in your gauntlet, right?
Yes.
And that first power is that weird, like, firebird.
Yes.
Right? It didn't really look like a bird, but that weird, like, firebird. And then from there, it just opened up. And that, like, talking about open world games, that's really what blew open my mind, because once you leave that city, it goes to that overview world, right?
You go to the world
anywhere.
map. Yeah.
And you can go anywhere. And it's like, oh, you want to go all the way to the, like, skip a couple cities? You're going to get your butt kicked, but go for it.
But go for it. Try.
Yep.
Did you not play any of the RPGs on Super Nintendo? Too young?
No. Yeah, not really. Not really. I mean, I have now, like, gone back and played, like, Super Mario RPG, yeah, and Legend of the Seven Stars or whatever.
Yeah, I'm the same way. Like, a friend had an SNES. I'd seen some RPGs. I had seen Final Fantasy 1 at a friend's house. I'd seen Final Fantasy 3 or 6, if you're the Japanese version. But it wasn't until I got the PS1. I knew I thought RPGs were cool. It wasn't Legaia. There's another game on PS1. When I got the PS1 really, really early because my parents were awesome, and it was like $500 like launch. It was super expensive, and I begged and I begged,
wow.
and I got it like within the first year of it launching.
Yeah,
and the first JRPG that came out on PlayStation 1, I'm pretty sure, like 99% sure, it was the very first one, was called Beyond the Beyond. Do you remember that game?
I've never heard of it.
So, yeah. Anyway, so that I got that as soon as it came out, and I wanted to get into JRPGs. I played Beyond the Beyond, and then eventually you could get like a Super Nintendo for like $30. Like they were really cheap. And I bought a Super Nintendo and went back and played like Chrono Trigger, all the classics, right?
Yes,
all the classics. And then they released Chrono Trigger with Final Fantasy Anthology on the PS1.
Okay.
And then I played through it again. But I'm similar. I didn't play Legaia. I got way like JRPGs. It was like that's when I went from like I like playing games to I'm a gamer. I got way into JRPGs, and it was Beyond the Beyond was the first one, and then I think I played the Final Fantasies. Legaia was, I always considered, that's interesting that was your first one, because Legend of Legaia is like a deep cut. It's really not that, it's kind of not that popular.
So you are honestly the first person I've ever had a conversation about Legaia with. And I swear this happened at work one day.
It probably
we mentioned it, and I was like, whoa, you're the only other person, because no one else knew it. And I remember, so I was so into it that, like, for Halloween I wanted to be Vaughn. My mom made me this like little gauntlet. She made me this weird vest.
Oh, you went full on.
Dude, I had she made my hair like
the blue spike.
Yeah, the blue spike, everything, right? And kids were like, "Oh, is this kid? Yeah,
who
what's
the
he doing?
fuck is this guy?
what does he do?" I'm like, "I'm Vaughn." And he's like, they're like, "Yeah, he's weird."
Yeah.
But yeah, man, that game opened it up. But then that friend that I was telling you about that bought Fable for me, he, like I said, he was a couple years older, so he had like a little bit more like knowledge of all these other games. He had an older brother that brought games into the house too, and he introduced me to Final Fantasy, like just Final Fantasy in total.
Was it 7 the first one you played?
No, and that's the other thing that I was backwards on. It was 8.
You're the second person that's been on that said they played 8 first.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is, I don't know, I'm going to try to predict. Actually, the third person. I'm the third person. Audio Treats, who was episode 3, was the same way. When you play 8 first, going back to 7 is kind of shitty.
It was super. The graphics were super shitty.
Yes.
And then the scenes, the cutscenes sucked compared to the cutscenes on 8.
Yes.
But yeah, it felt shitty.
So your first Final Fantasy was 8.
First Final Fantasy was 8. And I got really into, like, I loved it with the gun blade. I thought that was the coolest weapon ever. I liked how the fight system was interactive. And so you would fight, but yet you would push, like, R1.
To get the extra hit with the gun blade.
The extra hit with the gun blade.
Yeah.
And just all of that. It was so immersive, right? And I don't know if you remember that, in that game, once you get far enough where you're starting to do kind of more the overworld stuff, remember when the garden that you're in is in peril and it turns into the ship?
Yes.
And then you're able to take that around, and then it gets cooler from there.
Yeah, I think 8 gets a lot of shit from a lot of people. Obviously, I've made this example before. I like Nirvana as a band.
Yes.
I don't think they're the best grunge band.
Okay.
I think Alice in Chains is better than Nirvana.
Okay.
And some other grunge artists, Pearl Jam, whatever. But Nirvana brought grunge to the masses.
Totally.
That's why they're legendary, and I think they deserve to be legendary for that.
Mm-hmm.
Final Fantasy VII brought JRPGs to a whole new audience of people that previously weren't into JRPGs.
Totally.
And for that, it's legendary. But out of the Final Fantasies on PS1 and the Final Fantasies as a whole, I think it's a little overrated.
Sure.
I think 8 is better. Now, I played him in order. I got 7 first, then 8. But I liked 8 more for a couple reasons. One, I liked that the characters on the world map, on the pre-rendered screens, were the same characters in battle. One thing I hated about 7 was when you're in the world map, you're like these blocky, chibi, stupid-looking assholes. Then when you get into battle, your Cloud looks awesome.
You look great.
He looks bad.
Yeah.
And then on 8, it was and their proportions were more realistic.
Yeah.
And you could actually see your 2 other party members would follow you around. They wouldn't just like appear out of your body then disappear back into your body.
Yep.
I liked that. Obviously the CGI and the cut scenes. The opening cut scene for 8, the opening movie with Seifer and Squall battling, and he slices him and gives him the scar. Then he does the magic attack. It was mind blowing. And then
so good.
What do they say? It's like in Latin.
Oh,
the choir singing in Latin.
Yeah.
The waves coming on the beach. Damn. And then I thought the idea of like you have all these different gardens that are like their own countries with their own armies.
Yep.
And then I really, really, really liked. The first time I didn't like it, but later as I understood the junctioning system, which a lot of people hate. Yes, it's grindy. You have to draw these spells from people, but the ability to you have all these different spell combinations attached to all your different stats.
Yep.
And for me as a young kid, I thought that was cool. Like, oh, I get more of a stat boost if I take like a cure spell and I junction it to my HP stat. I'm going to get more of a boost than if I junction it to my strength stat.
Totally.
Because that makes sense. It's a cure spell. It should actually give you more of an HP boost. So like it wasn't just junctioning spells to certain stat points. It was like what spells make sense. A fire spell is going to actually be better to junction to your strength or your defense. Or actually for defense, like something like shield or barrier. If you have 99 barriers, that's going to boost your defense way more than 99 fires, et cetera, et cetera. And that whole system, it made you feel smart.
Yeah.
Made me feel like it's not that complicated now, but for a 13-year-old kid, it seemed really complicated.
Totally. But like the customization too.
Yeah.
You're like, oh yeah, like what do I want my character to be? Do I want to be this, this badass that does these things, or has more kind of with health, right? More of the healer type. Yeah, that game was incredible, and kind of blew open the RPG world. And I've gone back since and went to 7.
Have you beat 7 since? Later?
Since 8, yeah, later for sure.
But you
for
didn't,
sure.
when you first played it after 8, you just didn't like it, and you didn't beat it till much later.
So 7, I was really critical of 7 just because it looked bad.
Yeah.
That was the primary driver for me. As I was like, man, 8 was great cutscenes. I actually liked the characters in 8, and it gets a lot of shit for the character development versus 7, which the characters are pretty, they're pretty good. The storylines are pretty good. Like, you disagree with like Barrett, for instance, and like that home with his little girl and Tifa.
I like it.
I liked it way better.
Because a lot of people think the characters in 7 are better.
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying.
Okay,
I'm saying 8. The character sucked. Like the
I
development.
liked him though.
Right. I liked it because it was like the initial, but like comparing that with 7, I like that.
That's
It was
true.
better in 7. Although the storyline and stuff was great, and I liked that a little better in 7. But the visuals, it was hard for me to get past that initially.
Yeah.
But I've gone back and beat 7 and I love 7 and I love 8, and they're both great. And they're just very different.
If you're into emulating and hacking, I know eventually we're going to get a Final Fantasy VII remake, I guess next year in March, they say.
Eventually, maybe.
We'll say.
Maybe.
We'll see what happens March 2020. Say your prayers. But there's a site called like Tifa's Seventh Heaven. It's like a forum board.
Yeah, because you can download games there too, yeah?
I don't know if you can download games, but it's a little bit complicated. I did it with the Steam version of Final Fantasy VII. You can basically do an HD remaster for
Really?
Final Fantasy VII. So you can swap. The main issue was chibi characters on the regular screens, world map, and the pre-rendered screens.
Okay.
You can swap them out for actual battle characters, and you can swap those battle characters for basically fan-created better versions.
Right,
And
okay.
so there's basically in hack you can do for the PC version, you can swap out all the character models for both battle and world. There's a new technology called NVIDIA Ansel technology or Google Pixel something where they use artificial intelligence to upscale original images. Okay. It's not just running a filter, but basically you feed the algorithm a bunch of images and it doesn't just glaze over. It actually uses some sort of logic to place pixels where they should be.
Okay.
And you can so someone's gone through and done all the backgrounds from Final Fantasy. Obviously, Final Fantasy, anything Zelda, Mario, and Final Fantasy VII, there's going to be a fan community of mods behind. And if you want to get deep into modding, I have it. We can talk about after I can show you later. You can basically play an HD remaster of Final Fantasy VII right now on PC. It takes about 3 hours to set up from scratch. It's kind of a pain in the ass.
Yeah.
But all the backgrounds have been upscaled using AI technology to 4K. All the models have been swapped out. All the menus have been overdone with higher resolution icons. And there's so many options. You can customize the portraits on the menu screen. You can customize, like, does Cloud show is the sword on his back, or do you want the sword hidden?
Okay.
Like you can go deep into it. You can take character models from different games, like Dissidia, and put them into the game, so they're actually models that would have never worked on the original PlayStation version.
Sure.
And it's not easy, but if you're listening right now and you want to play, you don't want to wait because you don't think the remake's actually going to come to fruition, which I wouldn't blame you. You can play an HD remaster version of Final Fantasy VII right now, and I'm like halfway through. I'm on disc 2.
Really?
I just kind of been playing it casually, and the only downside is once you mod everything, it's hard to swap things in and out. Like you have to pick what you like from the beginning. Yeah. And kind of stuck with it, or you've got to remod the whole thing and start a whole new game. Yeah. That might be different because I originally modded it like 3 years ago. There's been a bunch of improvements in the community, and I think it's called Seventh Heaven Boot Manager. It's like a pre-program that compiles everything and then overrides the PC system's files and then feeds the PC version like new files. And so you have to stick with what you pick.
Man, and all of that's just open source.
It's all community based.
Just community based. Holy
and
cow.
There's a reason Kotaku actually posted about it way back in the day. And on Tifa's Seventh Heaven, there's a really good, if you've never modded anything before, you just basically follow the steps. It goes with you step by step. Here's what you need to download. Download this. Download that. Here's how you decide the boot order. Like the mods have to be placed in the right order because if they override the wrong one in the wrong order, it'll break the game. But you don't have to understand all of that. You just have to basically be able to follow instructions.
Dude,
so if you want to replay that game,
I might. I've been holding out for the remake, but it just been depressed that it hasn't come out time and time again. So. Probably have to take that up.
Yeah, 7's a good game. I think that if you play through it with all of the modded updates, maybe it's better than 8. The hard thing is like there's certain things just aesthetically about the art style that I like better about it. Like the ship, the Ragnarok, that red ship, so badass.
So cool.
So badass.
Yeah, I agree.
The love story didn't resonate with me as a kid. But I was like, whatever, just get past it. But 8 was. Did you play 9?
I didn't. I've never played 9 to this day.
That one's good.
I've heard very mixed things. Half the people I've talked to, and it's probably not half, but a bunch of people I've talked to hated 9. So I was like that guy that bought me that Fable game.
He wasn't into it.
He wasn't into 9, and so I kind of adopted that. So I've never played it, but I mean, people like yourself said it's awesome.
It's solid. Depends on. So if you were an early Final Fantasy fan that you were into the Nintendo and the Super Nintendo versions, you're gonna like 9 because they went back. So a lot of people the reason they didn't like 8 is 8 was this mix of like sci-fi, guns and swords, which Final Fantasy traditionally was fantasy.
It's like mages,
wizards and mages and all the previous Final Fantasy games up to 7. They reinvented the series for 7. Previous to 7, every Final Fantasy game, like most of them, they have certain themes they follow. It was all based around the crystals.
Okay.
Right, you have your basically 4 to 6 main crystals depending on the game. You have spells, you have fire, Fyra, Fyagra, Thunder, Thundara, Thundaga. Like it was always the same naming conventions. The Agas, Thundaga, Fyagra, Blizzaga were always like the highest version of each of those spells. It was the same elements. You had Demi, Earth. You had your summons, which was either guardian forces or summons, depending on which game. And then Final Fantasy VII kept some of that, but switched it all up with this modern aesthetic. So for 9, they went back to crystals, mages, magic, and you could have 4 people in your party, which all the Final Fantasy games up to 7, you had 4 in your party. 7 did the 3. So 7, 8, and 9, you could only have 3 people. Oh, 7 and 8, you could only have 3 people in your party. You could have 4 people in the party. It was kind of a throwback. So if you were into the newer Final Fantasies, you weren't into it. But if you were a fan of the original Final Fantasies, it was like mixing the new with the old that you hadn't gotten. So I think that's why you get that mix.
Yeah. You get some of the... Because isn't one of the characters... It looks very similar to like the Super Nintendo version of like the
Black
mage.
Vivi, yes. So I don't want to get too much... Now that you're older, and a lot of the philosophical and sort of existential thought in that game went over my head as a kid. But without too much spoilers, Vivi, the mage, who looks like the black mage from the early Final Fantasies, he's basically constructed. They're creating these mages using, instead of like an android, like a robot, they're using magic to animate beings that are magicians, but they're created by humans.
Yeah.
And so what's really cool about Final Fantasy IX, the main character is Zidane, starts out really confident. He's like this brash thief, rogue, gets the ladies, he's a badass. Through the course of the game, he sort of loses himself and loses his bearings. And then the second, I think, main character of that game is Vivi, who's the opposite. He starts out the game like he realizes very early on he was manufactured, but he's not like the other mages. There's a kingdom or a country in the game that uses black mages as like their army, like their drone army. But instead of robotic drones, they're like these magical drones. But he's self-aware. All the other mages are not self-aware. So he has this whole journey of like, am I human? Am I conscious? What am I? And so he starts out not knowing who he is. By the end of the game, he really is sort of this all out, and he becomes empowered. And then the main character starts out empowered and becomes disempowered, and they cross paths. So the game starts out, Zidane is basically helping Vivi, the black mage, like come to terms with, you may be manufactured, but you're special. You still have value. You're conscious. It doesn't matter where you came from. I still view you as human. At the end of the game, Vivi's comforting Zidane, who like has lost who he is, without spoiling the story too much. And so I thought, like, it's not until I played that game a second time, and actually Adam Scott was on the podcast not too long ago. He brought that up. And once he brought that up, I started thinking about it. I'm like, that is true. I never noticed that as a kid.
Yeah.
The Vivi definitely made me think like, oh, even as a young kid, all right, well, if he was manufactured, but he's conscious, is he human? Is he at the same quality? Is his life worth the same as like a quote unquote natural life?
Yeah.
But I didn't, like the crisscross of basically how they flipped the two protagonists. I didn't really realize how someone else brought up on the podcast. Anyway, I think you'd like it. I mean, it isn't...
Sounds awesome.
You should play the remastered version, which came out... Well, not really remastered. Like, I guess remastered. It's on Steam. It's on Switch.
Yeah.
It's on PlayStation 4. Because they have a bunch of quality of life improvements. They have a speed multiplier.
Okay.
The RB can like times 2, times 4, times 8 for battles.
Okay.
You can turn random encounters off completely if you just want to like go through the story, not do random encounters.
Yeah.
They have like infinite money. It's like if you just want to kind of get through the game and do the story, not grind, they have a lot of quality of life improvements.
Jeez.
Yeah.
You said that's on the Switch as well.
That's on Switch and Steam.
Crazy, man. That's crazy.
I'm pretty sure I know it's on Steam. I'm pretty sure it's on Switch. Because Final Fantasy 12's on Switch now. The remaster of 8 just got announced.
Because
coming out.
I've been toying with the idea of getting a Switch
You should get a Switch.
For a couple reasons. So I can kind of play myself, but then I can also get my kid into Pokemon. He loves Pokemon.
Pokemon's a good one.
I hear the new Pokemon game's pretty dope. Because we recently went through and played through Pokemon Yellow. You remember that game?
I only played Red and Blue way back.
So it's basically I swear it's the same, or it's very, very similar,
close.
Except you start with Pikachu instead of Bulbasaur or Charmander.
Yeah.
And so it was, and I think there are subtleties throughout the game that may have been different. That is such a great game, though. All those old school Pokemon games, such great games.
Definitely a lot of time playing Pokemon back in the day. That is a good one for kids. I let my kid play Switch. She was playing Sonic earlier today, my oldest. Still a little, in the actual handheld mode, it's still a little too big for her hands to be able to reach everything with her thumb. And it's like things I take for granted. Just the idea of holding the directional button and jumping at the same time is really hard for her.
Yeah.
She'll be like, I'll have her playing. She'll come over, Dad, I can't do the jump. It's like, oh, you got to hold it over and jump. And she's been playing Hollow Knight too. That's like her game.
Interesting.
She just basically spawns in the same spot. And what's weird is she's memorized the map. It's interesting how smart little kids are.
Dude, it's wild.
She knows how to get back to 20 screens later, and because she's played it so many times. She can't do the controls very well. But yeah, it's great for kids. It's great for indie games. If you're into I love Metroidvanias, 2D platformers.
Okay.
There's so many new indie games coming out that I'm almost all releasing on Switch.
Yeah.
Anything that's 2D retro, I get for Switch.
Okay.
Anything that's 3D higher end graphics, I get for PC.
Yeah. Smart.
And there's so many good games on Switch.
Man, so here's a question for you. Have they re-released Banjo-Kazooie for Switch?
No.
Actually, they wouldn't, because that would be owned by Microsoft. Because I remember. So, did you ever get into Banjo-Kazooie back in the day? So that's probably one of the first ones that I started playing with my child, because Banjo-Kazooie was so formative on me, and Rare just knocked that one out of the park.
Yeah.
And like you said, the graphics were incredible.
You're talking 64 Banjo-Kazooie.
N64 version Banjo-Kazooie. Yeah, absolutely.
Didn't that one require the upgraded pack,
The
right?
Rumble Pack?
The Rumble. There was a Rumble Pack, and there was also because I think there was something you put in before you put the cartridge in. And it was Donkey Kong 64.
Yes, you're right. Yep. Donkey Kong 64.
It came with whatever add-on that you had to get. It gave it extra memory or something like that.
Yeah. I think it was extra memory for sure. Yeah. So Banjo-Kazooie, that's probably one of the staples that was not in the RPG world that was really formative.
You were into it, yeah.
Really into it. The music was incredible on that game. Listening now, I have it on, my wife's like, what the hell are you listening to? And I'm like, oh, it's just Banjo-Kazooie, don't worry. Because it's so zany, right? It's so weird, so cartoony and zany, but so nostalgic and so good. But the replayability of it is not super good because the controls
are probably
they're wonky as hell.
Yeah, that makes sense.
The camera is hard to see where you're going. But I hear they remastered it for the Xbox One. They
came out with a new Banjo-Kazooie. I don't think it's a remaster. I think it's a new. I'm 98%. I was gonna say 97% positive. I was pretty positive. Because there was a backpack mechanic where you could put pieces of puzzles on your backpack. I remember, I didn't play it, but I remember the marketing campaign for a new Banjo-Kazooie, and it was on Xbox 360, actually, I think. Okay. Maybe Xbox One.
Okay.
But it's not a remake, it's a new Banjo-Kazooie.
Cool, that's awesome. Because they have you heard of the Rare Replay? Because that's a game that they have all the old school Rare games, and I mean
it's like a compilation game.
It's a compilation game, but they mastered a lot of them. So they have Perfect Dark on there.
Okay.
And they have Banjo-Kazooie and Banjo-Tooie. They have Conker's Bad Fur Day, a bunch of other ones like that. Jet Force Gemini.
That was a good one.
So I never actually got into that. My friend had it, but they would always be like, "Yeah, that one's too." That one's too complex. Let's play Smash Bros or something.
Yeah.
Which is probably a good choice at the time. I mean, I was young. But I've heard such good things about that game.
That was it was a complicated game. My friend had it. We played together. It was complicated because it was a little bit of a Metroidvania where you had to backtrack.
Okay.
So you would get like an extra jump pack, and that double jump would allow you to access areas. You have to go back to the first level and use a double jump, and then that would get you an item that would make you be able to access another area. That whole Metroidvania type Super Metroid gameplay that I hadn't played. I'm trying to think. The first game like that I got really into was Castlevania Symphony of the Night, which
Great
is
game.
probably my second favorite game of all time. But yeah, Jet Force Gemini was. I remember thinking that it was kind of violent, like you kill the bugs and there'd be blood. And I remember thinking, because my parents were pretty strict, and I was like thinking I was rebel for playing that at my friend's house.
Yeah,
whose parents were like even more strict than me, but for some reason they didn't care about video games, and we would actually listen to what's that band? Responsibility, not yet. Responsibility, not quite yet. I don't want to think about it. I'm better off without it. Responsibility, not yet. It was like this pop punk band. Dang it. For those of you listening, whoever sings that responsibility, dang it. Not Sum 41, but MXPX, not MX. Maybe it is MXPX.
Could have been.
I think, anyway, we would play Jet Force Gemini and listen to that punk CD all the time. And it was like Rebel, right?
Yeah.
Listening to punk, playing Jet Force Gemini, you're blowing plugs up, and there's blood splatter everywhere. But it was hard. Like, we never beat it. We couldn't beat it.
You know what's so funny about this? So you mentioned that your friends' parents were more hardcore, but yet games would slip through.
Yeah.
I feel like that's a common thing because my friends' parents were really, really Machiavellian with their rules and everything. But yet I would go over. We played Turok. You remember
Which
Turok?
was bloody
Which
as
was
shit.
bloody,
Yeah.
so bloody. We played Turok, like all sorts of games like that, and it was like somehow games just slipped under the radar. Like, oh yeah, it's a video game, right?
I think a lot of parents just thought video games was like a little kid thing.
Sure.
Like kids play games and they're not really, I think, because they didn't grow up gaming. I mean, gaming, home console gaming. I mean, you had like ColecoVision and Atari before NES, but they weren't like a cultural phenomenon hit. The
Sure.
NES, at least from my understanding in America, was the first console that got like a big market share.
Yeah.
A lot of homes had the NES, and that released in 85 or 86.
Okay.
And so they didn't grow up having games at home. And I think they just were out of touch.
Yeah.
Some parents were a little bit more in touch than others. Like my parents didn't know anything about Grand Theft Auto. Obviously, as I got older, they were enforcing games when I was younger, like the Streets of Rage story.
Yeah.
But as I got older, I could either get them myself or I could buy them myself. Or like they wouldn't check. Like I remember buying Grand Theft Auto. I was not 17, but they didn't check. They just let me buy it. Like,
Yeah.
Because I actually worked at GameStop later in my life, and they started implementing you could get fired if you didn't actually ask for ID.
Yeah.
But when they first came out, the rating systems, they were there for parents, but it wasn't really enforced.
Right. Wasn't.
And
hard.
I remember buying Grand Theft Auto 3. And my parents knew I had it, and my dad would come down. He was curious about graphics technology, or like just see how the graphics were.
Sure.
Graphics are cool, but they ran a news story. It got on the news about the whole you can get a prostitute, you
Yep.
can bang her in the car, restores your health, then you
Yep.
can kill her, get your money back. Like, which is, you can do that.
Yeah,
It's just
yeah.
like one small slice of the game. And I remember my mom, my dad or my mom, I think it was my dad, coming down and being like, I know about this game. I saw it on the news and I don't approve of you playing it. And we had like this big argument. And my defense was, this is an open world game. He's free to choose whatever you want. Yes, you can be an evil person, but I don't choose to be evil.
Right.
That's not how I play it, Dad.
Yep.
I would never bang a prostitute and kill her and get my money back, which I had done all the time because you heard about it. It's like, I'm going to try that. Can you actually do that?
Yeah.
A lot of that game back in the day was like, you hear like a friend saying, oh, I jumped this car off this, or I remember like there was this one parking garage in Grand Theft Auto 3 that I'd go to the top of the parking garage and the AI was not smart enough to like come up the parking garage. So I would just get a sniper rifle and start killing people, get my stars all the way to 5. But they would just sit around the outside, and I would just see how long I could last.
Yeah.
And I'd usually run out of ammo before they got me.
Sure.
It was just like pushing the boundaries of the game. So if you heard, if a friend told you, hey, you get life when you bang a prostitute and then you can get your money back. So it's basically getting healed without spending any money. Of course.
Sure.
Of course you're going to try that.
Sure.
Absolutely.
Sure. Man, it's that game. It's so funny because you can do those things, when you're just messing around in the overworld or in the game, whatever you want to call it. But it's funny. Like, do you ever have this thing where you're like, oh no, I'm actually going to play this story. And you play this story, and that's when your parents walk in, is like the dialogue, which is so
and they're
raunchy.
just dropping bombs, F-bombs here, F-bombs there.
Which is arguably way worse than just you're messing around in the overworld.
That has definitely happened, like or your parent will walk in, and you're in between like story beats, and they're watching you play like, oh, I'm not going to trigger a cutscene right now because I know if they see the cutscene, they're going to take this game away.
Tony comes in, starts just,
Omar brought up on our podcast, he's the only one that bring this up, and it jogged my memory. He wasn't super into gaming, he was into sports gaming, and he was into rollerblading and skateboarding, and he got BMX XXX.
BMX Triple X?
Just because he heard you could see boobs in it.
Oh, man.
And the way that game worked is if you beat a level with a high enough score, then you would get what they call FMV sequence, a full motion video sequence, which was basically just recorded video compressed enough to fit on the disc.
Okay.
Just like a live video shoot, and they had strippers, and you'd get rewarded with like a topless, because it'd be like your character won the competition, and he goes to the strip club and he gets a dance.
Got it.
Right? And I think they even had tassels on. I don't know if they were like fully topless.
Sure.
But he's like, I got that game just because I heard you could see boobs, and I only got good at the first 2 levels because you had to get really good in order to unlock the video. And so I just got good enough at the first 2 levels that anytime I wanted, I could play through the level and unlock the video.
Yeah.
And it's like his parents never knew. Like his parents were totally clueless. Like I say, like for some reason, some parents were just they were on the video game thing and they were tight about it.
Yeah.
Or they just sort of like, kids are playing games.
Yeah.
And they're like my cousin. Speaking of Turok, I remember my parents were really strict about games. They were on the ball. And my cousin, whose parents were way more... Like, my parents were pretty strict when it came to religious stuff, but my cousins were almost like kind of that weird religious person. Like they made even like the strict people sort of... Like they were the type of people that you couldn't dress up for Halloween because it was satanic.
Got it.
They went deep. They went hard in the paint.
God, I had a friend. So are they like this? I had a friend that he couldn't watch any PG movies without getting them approved, and he couldn't watch some G movies. Pocahontas was banned from his house because it was skimpy. That's how they were. Okay.
They were really, 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 really intense. Like they had an interesting relationship. My aunt and uncle. The rumor in the family is that they never consummated their marriage. Both the kids are adopted.
Really?
And they would tell people that they couldn't. I don't know. I think they actually couldn't have kids, but I also think that they were very pious people.
Okay.
Very reverent, very and I was like this bad influence on my cousin. But I was a pretty good kid for the most part because my parents were strict. But I remember speaking of Turok, I remember going over and my uncle was playing Turok with my cousin. And I remember being like, I called him out. I'm like, why do you like? I can't even play this game.
Yeah.
And he's like, it's just like it's green blood. It's fake. Like it's not realistic at all. But for whatever reason, like my cousin on Sundays they couldn't do anything. They couldn't hang out. They couldn't play. Where I was like, I could go play with friends on Sundays. My parents were like the Sabbath day thing. They were pretty lax on.
Sure.
On like 99% of things. My cousins lived like right next door to us. They were behind us, so I'd hang out with and he was like a couple of years younger than me. And I hang out with them all the time, and they were way more strict. But they didn't care about Turok. They didn't care about Halo. Like all these things that I couldn't play for whatever reason. It was like, that's a good point. Like they just didn't like movies. They were strict about movies, but they were not strict about video games. And he would even play with his kid and see the game, and it wouldn't trigger his sort of pious mindset at all. I don't know why.
Interesting. It's weird. It's weird.
It's super weird.
Video games escapes the filter of some of these, some of these
I wonder
types.
now. I wonder like modern kids growing up in hyper religious households, whether it's Mormonism or Seventh-day Adventist or like Protestant or someone who's like really, really pious, I wonder if I imagine video games would be more. They're more mainstream now, and parents are probably more aware. But maybe we just grew up in a time where it was like the golden age, where a lot of parents just turned a blind eye.
Probably. I mean, there's currently such a big attack on video games, right? Trying to associate modern day violence with being on video games.
Oh,
because I think that's the big thing now, and that's why it's so like parents are probably really vigilant if they're on that side of the spectrum, because it's going to turn my kid into a serial killer. Nah, science doesn't support that.
Like I saw a really good post that was like, okay, Canada, Australia. They said, I think it was Portugal, France, Italy. They named off like 30 countries.
Sure.
All have the exact same games that we have.
Yep.
No mass shooters.
Yep.
So, I don't know. It all started with Columbine because the kids at Columbine played Doom. That's the first time.
Doom was hardcore, though.
Doom was pretty hardcore.
Brutalized in the face, like, dude. Doom was
definitely the most
man.
like Satan. And I remember I had a young men's leader that let me play Doom. So, and speaking of the same thing, so I had a young men's leader that was like the most hardcore LDS member. He was also he was my primary teacher.
Okay.
Through like 3 or 4 years of primary, and then he became a young men's leader. So as I got older, his calling, for those of you who don't know anything about growing up Mormon or LDS, there's like callings. There's a group of people, about 150 of them live in a local area at a ward. Each person has a calling, basically like a job to do in the community. And some people's callings is to like do activities with the youth. And so they split between boys and girls. So as a youth, you usually have an activity once a week, and there's someone in your local neighborhood who's in charge of doing activities for youth. But every 2 years, you grow up, you join a new youth group. Well, he would basically just get called to the new. So you started as a deacon, priest, whatever. He just followed me. So he was my young men's leader through primary and a lot of young men's. Uh-huh. And he was super hardcore. He told me, I remember in Deacon's Quorum, which is, for those that don't know, it's if you're 12 to 14, is Deacons?
12.
Just 12.
Yeah, it's 12. Yeah, 12 to
12,
14.
13.
12 and
14 to 15 is teachers. 16 to 18 is priests. So from 12 to 13, he was my leader, and he taught me lessons. When I would go to church, he'd be the guy that gives the lessons. And he told me that he knew through revelation that the prophet who's going to be prophet when Jesus comes back has already been born.
Okay.
And he was hardcore. He was like amongst the ward, the local community. He was one of those families that was so hardcore. They were kind of on the outskirts.
Okay.
Like they were really, really poor. Uh-huh. And really, really hardcore into like deep Mormonism. Mm-hmm. And he would always say things. He would always claim, like, he'd get up for a testimony meeting, which, if you don't know, once a month, the LDS Church people get up, instead of having regular speakers, it's sort of like an open mic. Basically, they have an hour where anyone from the congregation can get up and share their thoughts and feelings. Well, he would get up and talk about like getting personal revelation, which is interesting because that's a tenet of Mormonism, the idea that, but
Sure.
you're not really supposed to do it.
Sure.
Or anyway, he would get up and be like, I had a revelation that, anyway, he claimed that he had revelation that the prophet who was going to be prophet when Jesus comes back is already alive, meaning Jesus is coming back in my lifetime.
Yeah.
So this guy's hardcore, but he let me play Doom all the time. He would let me play Doom. And I remember,
crazy.
and like sometimes we'd have like weeks where the young men's activity wasn't well attended.
Yeah.
But my parents made me go every week.
Uh-huh.
And I remember specifically there was one week where I was the only one that showed up to the church.
Uh-huh.
It was just me and him. And he knew I liked games. He's like, do you want to go play Doom? He didn't have anything planned. It was just me.
Yeah.
I was like, yeah. So, and he had the computer in his bedroom because he didn't let his kids. He didn't let kids because of the internet and porn and all that. He was super strict.
Yeah, yeah.
And so the computer was not in the, like, it was only in his bedroom, and his kids could only get on the computer with his supervision.
It was to protect the kids.
Yeah. Now that I think about it.
Everything you're describing is red flags, my friend.
He was kind of a weird dude. And his kids turned out really weird, too. So there might have been, He was a shifty dude, but also it's weird how anyway. He was like hardcore, always claiming to have revelations, deep doctrine. He let me play Doom, and I remember him telling me, don't let your parents know that I let you play this game, because I know your parents wouldn't be cool with it. Yeah. And I remember I had, because of the internet, or he had internet, we did the no clip. That was Doom 2, actually. And we did some cheat codes and got to the last level. And the very last level of Doom 2, the final boss is like this giant pentagram skull in the wall, and you have all these other demons, and you have to shoot rockets into the mouth. But if you use the no-clip cheat code, you can go through the final boss of the wall, and behind the final boss is a severed head on a stick. And the severed head is John Carmack, the main programmer for Doom.
Okay.
It was like an Easter egg, but neither one of us knew that.
Yeah.
We were like talking about like what is the symbolism, because the end boss is Satan, basically.
Sure.
And that behind the illusion of Satan is just a severed human head.
Yeah.
And he was tying it to like the fall of Lucifer and the pre-earth life. And like I just had this weird memory of playing Doom with him and like getting into deep religious discussions, trying to connect Satan and the pre-earth. Like, yes, interesting. He was super hardcore, but he didn't feel wrong letting me play Doom, even though he knew my parents wouldn't be cool with it.
So not only is it playing Doom, it's assigning all sorts of spiritual meaning to aspects of Easter eggs in the game, basically, all the way down to don't tell your parents.
Don't tell my parents.
Which is never a good sign.
By the way, for the record, he never tried anything funky with me.
Sure.
I don't think he was that kind of guy.
Sure.
I think it was just like, I think what it really came down to, no one showed up for an activity. He didn't have anything planned. It's like, I'm just going to entertain this kid with some video games. He loves to play Doom. Just don't tell your parents.
Totally. And I mean, I would cut him slack too. I'm sure he was just like, that's his outlet, right?
Yeah.
I play these games. All right.
I also had the hots for his daughter. She was like a year younger than me. And so I was also stoked to go to their house because I might run into his daughter.
Yeah.
But she wasn't there that night, unfortunately.
No.
Yeah.
That's crazy. I never got into Doom. Never got into Doom, unfortunately.
Yeah, it was tied to the Columbine thing because I think the kids mentioned Doom in their manifesto. It's like one of the... I don't think they had I'd have to look at this again. And
yeah.
I don't think they directly attributed their motivation to Doom, but it was mentioned, or the parents had mentioned that they liked the game, but it wasn't part of the manifesto. And that's the first time I remember video games being used as a scapegoat for violence.
Right.
Was the Columbine mass shooting.
Interesting. That's kind of the beginning case of, hey, video games getting kids' heads, and then they shoot up schools.
The fact that they're still trying to do it now, like it doesn't make so much sense. Like I know the Republican Party, like I have my beef with both left and the right, but the fact that the right tried to do this video game thing, it's just like, come on.
Sure.
Like you just, like, look, I don't try to get into too much politics. Like, look, I don't know if just banning guns is not going to work. I think this just doesn't make logical sense. But if you're so pro-gun and you're so like worried about any blame on gun, like let's just pick video games.
Sure.
Because it makes like, do you want to solve the problem or not?
Sure.
Or do you want to just make a political play and protect the guns and win your popularity contest because you know a lot of your supporters are right-wing and they're worried about their gun rights being taken away, so you're just going to pick video games as an easy target? To me, shows you're not really interested in solving the problem. You're just interested in winning the next election. Which is probably the crux of our political issue across the board.
Right.
Because it's just trying to blame video. Like I said, the whole world plays video games.
Yep. Man,
but we're the only country with this. We're not the only country with mass shootings, but we're the only one with like the frequency.
Right.
So it's obviously not video games.
I don't know. I don't get that. I don't understand the credibility or the logic behind the arguments. Because it seems to me that there's a lot of studies that have disproven that. I mean, just like the one you said, right, with other countries specifically. So I don't know. I don't understand that. But
the thing is, more people are gaming now than ever, right? This is something we could talk about. When I first started becoming or identifying as a gamer, becoming more into video games versus the majority of my peers was somewhere around in the PS1 era. Definitely by PS2 I was all in. And if you were a nerd, it was like I kind of kept like I didn't talk about playing JRPGs at school. Hell no. Fuck that.
No.
Absolutely not. I'm not going to talk about Legend of Legaia or Legend of Dragoon or Beyond the Beyond at school because that's anime weird Japanese shit you're going to get made fun of.
Sure.
And but now it's way more, like that same cousin that was really hardcore used to make fun of me for playing games, and now he's way into gaming.
Yep.
Right? More people are playing games than ever. More people have consoles at home.
Yeah.
But I don't actually, for as far as I know, this is just based off Steven Pinker's book, which, by the way, I don't know if you know who Steven Pinker is.
Yeah, absolutely. Professor wrote.
I was all into Steven Pinker, but he's actually kind of crazy. I'm kind of like,
Really?
We'll have to get into that another day, but I'm sort of flipping my. Anyway, but he does make good points. The state of the world, especially when violent crime in the United States as a whole has gone way down. Mm-hmm. So if video games caused violence, you should see an uptick in just violent crime across the board.
Sure.
We're actually seeing less violent crime than ever in the history of recorded violent crime. Since we started taking records of all this stuff, we have some of the lowest crime rates. I think in the 90s is when it really started dropping.
Yeah.
But we have more video game adoption, more video game playing, more video games sold, more consoles in homes than ever. So I don't see how you can make the argument that video games. Look, there's probably some crazy kids out there that can't tell the difference between whether it's a game or a movie or a Marilyn Manson album, which is also Marilyn Manson. Music has been under fire for mass shootings before because of lyrics. But I just don't see the connection.
Yeah. Yeah, it seems like a gross misattribution to trying to peg something as the ultimate end all be all. I mean, you see that with everything. I think you hit it on the head with music, and all sorts of stuff. It's just not a lot of substance there.
Speaking of music, I wonder if Godsmack is still making music. I want to know if Godsmack has a new album.
Well, okay, so speaking of other games that had incredible music, as well as speaking of BMX XXX, so I never actually played that game. I never could get my hands on that. That one's a little bit harder to put a T on.
It says XXX on the cover.
But did you ever play Dave Mirra? Back in the day?
Dave Mirra's BMX, right?
Dave Mirra's BMX. And it had like Black Sabbath on it.
Yes.
It had like NERD.
I'm pretty sure that came out. So Tony Hawk's success, after Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1, there was like rollerblading games, there was biking games, there was more snowboarding games.
Cool Borders 2.
Cool Borders 2! Yes!
You get the alien?
Yeah, Cool Borders 2 and 1080 Snowboarding.
1080,
on 64, where there's two premier snowboarding games. I played a lot of Cool Borders.
Oh, yeah,
A lot of Cool Borders.
Cool Borders 2 was the game.
Yeah.
Have you ever tried any of the other Cool Borders?
Nope, only Cool Borders 2.
They suck so bad. I got one of the more recent. It was it's still on PlayStation 1.
Yeah.
It sucked so bad. It was not Cool Borders 2.
I bet Cool Borders 2 sucked. If you went back and played it right now, it probably wasn't that good. But after Cool Borders on PS2, you had the whole SSX franchise. SSX 1, 2, 3, and Tricky. I believe there's 4. Mm-hmm. Or maybe number 3 was Tricky. I know, because I had SXX1 was a launch title. When PS2 first came out, my friend Joey Wallen was my same friend that introduced me to that SNES, showed me Chrono Trigger. He's always like cutting edge video games. He got a PS2 launch day, and I got it like 6 months after launch. Okay. And even 6 months after launch, there's like 10 games. And SSX was one of them. So we played a lot. And that was like the new Cool Borders for me.
Yep.
But yeah, Cool Borders 2... Damn, I would have never remembered that if you brought it up. I played a lot of Cool Borders.
That game
was awesome.
So good. And it was so fun. Like, you felt so good once you got to the point where you could earn the alien riding on his UFO.
Yeah.
Doing all sorts of tricks. Dude, that game was great. Like, just the graphics probably didn't age well. I haven't seen it since I was way back then. So in my head, it's like vivid. But like, you're going off of the school buses in the snow and then like grinding on like the power lines and stuff. So good.
1080 was awesome because they had real world locations, and they had Brighton, which was a Utah resort, in 1080. So that was a big deal for all the homies. Like, they actually have a Utah location in 1080, and the graphics were a little bit. I remember this. So graphics were such a big deal. Now they're so good, and we're all used to them.
Yeah.
But I remember thinking 1080 was better because you could see your tracks in the snow, and Cool Borders you couldn't.
Sure. Okay.
So it was like, cool, 1080 is better because you actually can see your tracks in the snow.
Oh man, those graphics.
It's all about them graphics, baby.
Man, it's so funny. Like speaking of those real world like locations and games, that was groundbreaking. Like you remember Cruising USA?
Yes.
And it was like, whoa, we're in Moab or whatever. You know, we were in like real places. Crazy.
Cruising
stuff.
USA has some good memories because I remember my dad wasn't interested in games, and he sort of always low-key shamed me for playing games.
He's like, my son's a nerd.
I can't blame him because luckily they made me balance my life. When I was really young, I could only play games as much as I played sports outside.
Okay.
So if I did 2 hours of soccer practice, I could play 2 hours games. Once I became in high school, it was sort of like, as long as I got good grades, which if you're a younger kid, man, I don't know how kids are these days. Speaking of parents having weird rules, getting like above a 3.7, getting on the honor roll, not that hard in high school. Really not that hard.
Sure.
And if I got straight A's, maybe a B or an A minus everywhere, my parents just turned a blind eye.
Really?
I learned that really young in junior high.
That was the ticket.
And I actually think about that now. Even if my kids came home with straight A's, I'm going to be much less strict. Like, I'm just going to sort of assume they have their shit together.
They've earned it, right?
They've earned it, right?
Yeah.
And so I learned that if I got straight A's, I could sort of get away with things. What did I say before this? I'm losing my train of thought. Anyway, what were we talking about before this?
Cruising USA.
Oh, Cruising USA.
Yeah.
So my dad was low-key shaming me about games. And but when I got older, I was getting good grades, so they didn't really tell me when I could play and when I couldn't play.
Okay.
I was getting straight A's. I was playing drums a lot, and I had some hobbies. But he would shame me about games. But where I could get him on board was improvements in graphics technology.
Okay.
And I remember, have you heard the term pop-up? It's a graphics term meaning as things come in the horizon, the draw distance is that far.
Okay.
So a tree might just pop into existence because the draw distance, right? And I had never heard that term. And I remember seeing Cruising USA or Cruising World in the arcade and being like, I got to show my dad. The cars look so real. I'm going to impress my dad. Maybe he'll like games.
Yeah.
Maybe he won't hate me for liking games. And I remember showing him Cruising USA. It's weird how memories stick out. And he said, the cars look really realistic, but he didn't know what the term pop-up was, but he pointed out pop-up. He's like, do you see how like things in the horizon just sort of pop into existence?
Yeah.
They just sort of appear. They don't fade in. They got to figure that out. It's still like they're not there yet. And it's sort of like, I'm not impressed. Nice try, child. I'm not impressed.
Swing and a miss.
Swing and a miss.
Oh,
and
man.
that's the memory I have about Cruising USA. I remember the graphics blew my mind. And yes, the real world locations, because you could pick tracks all over the United States.
Yeah.
And he just wasn't impressed. He wasn't
into
impressed.
it. Man.
Unfortunately.
I thought you were going to take the driving route and say, oh, yeah, I loved it because the cars, like the driving.
The cars did look really, really good. And there was a game on 64 that I thought was cooler than Cruising USA. Do you remember Rush?
Yeah.
Rush, like Tricky Rush 2044
I
or some
vaguely
bullshit.
remember it.
Yeah.
Man, do you remember Gran Turismo? Man, we played Gran Turismo, and for one Christmas, I was like, Mom, Dad, the only thing I want is Gran Turismo with the steering wheel and the pedals.
You got the whole setup?
So I got the steering wheel and the pedals, right?
For PS2 or PS1?
I'm pretty sure it's just PS1.
Because Gran Turismo 1 and 2 were on PS1. Yeah.
It was PS1. But man, if you've ever tried to play Gran Turismo on simulator mode, you know what hardship is. You cannot get your license on that game, man.
Yeah.
It is so hard. At least with the steering wheel and everything, that was impossible.
Man, I think Gran Turismo might be the first sort of realistic sort of simulation, because all the racing games prior to Gran Turismo were way more arcadey.
Totally.
Like Ridge Racer was a PS1 launch title.
Okay.
And I had Ridge Racer early on, but it was like a arcadey type game.
Sure.
I didn't get into Gran Turismo was famous on PS1 and it was legendary, and especially the replay mode with the 3D graphics, you could control the camera.
Yep.
That was. Did you ever play a game called Driver?
I remember.
On PS1?
Yes, I
Yes.
remember it.
That just came into my mind.
Yes.
Driver was amazing. And I used to spend hours in the video editing mode where you could like do your mission and you go to replay mode and you could say, for this 10 seconds, put the camera here.
Yep.
For this 10, and you could make your own little movies
Yeah, it's very
in driver
cinematic.
mode. Oh, man. But Gran Turismo was the first to do that before Driver. But Gran Turismo 2 came out, or 3. It was actually A-Spec, Gran Turismo A-Spec, I think it's called, on PS2. And the graphical jump for that, like, I remember blowing my mind. And I got into that. And speaking of hardships, so Gran Turismo, I don't know if they had it on the PS1. You tell me if they have it. But on the PS2 version, they had endurance races, which were like 9-hour races. In order to unlock the Formula One car, you had to do 3 endurance races.
Oh my god!
And they're like 6 to 9 hours.
in real time.
In real time.
Holy
And
crow.
there's like 12 of them. And I just did the internet had come out by then.
Yeah.
What's the fastest car in the game you can unlock? Look that up. What are the races you have to do to unlock that car? And I just did, I believe it was 2 or 3 endurance races. But I remember putting on music and just like Saturday just sitting through. And you get so good. You're like 4 to 5 to 6 laps ahead of second place. And so you can kind of like doze off and have a bad lap because they have to lap you multiple times to catch up.
Yeah.
But it's a full 6 hours to beat those endurance races. Did they have endurance races on the first one?
I think they did. I am not 100% sure. I never did that.
Yeah.
Honestly, my time with Gran Turismo was literally just, I'm going to play simulation mode. I loved, like, you have your own garage. I love you custom make your cars. Loved that. And then I would always go and I would, like, get my licenses, and it sucked, and it was so hard. I'd be burnt out.
Yeah,
And
because
so-
you have to pass a test to unlock like the new circuit of racing.
Yep. And then from that, you don't have very much money. So then you have to buy a car, and it's always this terrible Toyota or something that doesn't run very well. It's like handling's garbage, and you have to race with that, right? To earn your stripes. And then you earn money, and then you can buy more parts, and you can continue to upgrade and upgrade and upgrade. I would get burnt out by probably the 5th or 6th race because the qualifying was the hard part.
Yeah.
And it was because I was trying to qualify with the damn steering wheel, right? And it was just hard to because it was really finicky. You would like turn, and it's not like a real
Did it have
car.
force feedback? Like it would kind of rumble and push back?
A little bit. Yeah, for sure. Like the steering wheel, like if you turn it like this, it was almost like it had power steering. Turn it like this and you let go and it would go boing and like bounce back.
Yeah.
But it wasn't like when you turn, it wasn't like a real car where you actually turn the wheel around, right? And it turns the wheels. So you would just be driving and you would like turn it like this.
It didn't have like the full range where you go over and over.
So you'd turn it like that and your car would like
Full turn.
And so it was so
small.
oh, okay, like I gotta make this and you like turn it like tiny bit and then your car would go, it was always fishtail. It'd like come over here and then come back and then you're just in this swing.
Yeah.
And you're like, this isn't even fun anymore. And that was my Gran Turismo experience the whole time.
Dang, yeah, Gran Turismo, that was, I think, the first simulator, and then you had Forza came out for Xbox, was like the Gran Turismo competition. But yeah, Gran Turismo 1 and 2 on PS1 I didn't play them, but I remember them being legendary, people talking about them. So eventually, somewhere around when PS1 launched, my parents got me a subscription to EGM, Electronic Gaming Monthly.
Okay.
And I had a subscription to that for almost a decade.
Uh-huh.
And I kept all of them until like a couple years ago. This is a really sad story. So I had a PS1 collection that was, honestly, if you're into JRPGs and PS1, I had the best collection in the world.
Okay.
Maybe not the world, but when it comes to just PS1 games, I had all the classics.
Yeah.
Black box, greatest hits. I had some games that were still shrink wrapped. I had 4 copies of Final Fantasy VII. This will be funny.
Whoa.
So I've told this story on the
Holy.
podcast before, but I think it's worth telling again. Final Fantasy VII, the first I got at launch. I pre-ordered it. I got it at launch. And I begged my parents to take me to GameStop the launch day. And we had just gotten back from a vacation at Lake Powell, and they were all tired. And I remember fake crying. Because my mom was like, let's just get it tomorrow. And I've been waiting for the game. I'm like, no, it's out. I pre-ordered it. We had just driven back from Lake Powell, which is like a 6-hour drive. And I was like, the GameStop's going to close. And I remember like putting on the fake show of crying.
Yeah.
Like it wasn't, but I needed my mom to take me. And we got it. And I played the game. So I got it at launch, the first version of the game. and my disc got scratched. And I remember it was 3 discs. It was disc 2.
Okay.
Disc 2 had a scratch in it. There's a cutscene. For those of you that remember the game, you get to the Juno, which is like the big gun mounted on like the shore. It's like a city called Juno. There's a cutscene where the airship lands, and the game would freeze on that cutscene, and I was stuck. And I had taken it. I remember back in the day when you had CDs you had like those CD cleaners.
Yeah.
You like spray the foam
Disc
on
doctors.
it. Disc doctors, right?
Yeah.
I had put it in multiple disc doctors. I had taken it to Games Crazy. They would like fix your discs. Nothing would fix the scratch. And I remember I was like super religious at the time. I was like, okay. I remember praying and praying, like bargaining with the higher power, with the God of my religious system. Like, I will read my scriptures. I won't masturbate. I'll do whatever it takes if you can just get this game to get past. Because I was stuck.
Yeah.
I couldn't get farther in the story. My prayers were never answered. The game never worked. And I ended up buying another copy of the game.
Okay.
Just to finish it.
Okay.
Right? Because I had that job. I was working construction in the summers, and I would make $100 a week, and I would basically use that money for the rest of the year during the school year. I had the money to buy the game again. I bought the game again, and then I bought it again, greatest hits version.
Yeah.
With the green bar instead of the black bar.
Yep.
And then I lost them anyway. So I had 4 copies, and I bought another copy later. So I had 4 copies of Final Fantasy VII. Long story short, I sold all that stuff early in marriage and needed money. I sold my whole collection, which I got somewhere between like $1,200, $1,300 for my whole collection.
Okay.
They gave me really fair prices for a lot of those games.
Yeah.
But I also got rid of all my EGMs.
Okay.
At the same time, I had like hundreds of EGMs. Why did I bring up EGM? I've been drinking too much whiskey.
Yeah.
What did I bring up EGM for?
You can tell me a sad story about all this.
What's the sad story about?
Is it just that you had to sell it all?
No, but why did I bring up EGM? What were you talking about?
We were talking about... Man, that was a minute ago.
Sorry, friends. Sorry. At least my words aren't starting. I don't remember why I bought. But anyway, I had EGM. Why did I talk about EGM? People listening like, oh my God, you're so stupid. What were we talking about EGM for?
Man, because you were saying about your collection. That's how you ramped it up. You had your collection.
Something in the collection. Anyway, I sold the collection, sold the EGMs. I didn't sell it. No one wanted the EGMs, but
Okay.
I just like threw them out. But I had this awesome collection of Electronic Gaming Monthly. I was going to bring it up because something in the magazines about one of the games we were talking about. They covered one of the games. What were we talking about before this?
Before that, we were talking
Gran
about
Turismo, right?
Yeah, Gran Turismo.
Oh
and
yes,
Forza.
Gran Turismo was mentioned in EGMs all the time.
Okay.
So I knew it was a legendary game, but I didn't play it till A-Spec came out on the PS2. Yeah, that's awesome. You're the first one to bring up Gran Turismo, actually. You're the first one to bring up Legaia. Dang, what else on PS1 do you remember?
Man, PS1. Played all sorts of crazy games. So, okay, riddle me this. Was Chrono Cross, that was PS1.
Woo!
Yeah?
Yeah, baby! Chrono Cross.
Chrono Cross it blew my world open again because you could have so many different choices of characters.
There was a lot of characters. And you
So
could miss
many.
if you did the wrong things. So the first time I played that game, I remember all I had was Serge, the main guy, the blonde-haired girl,
Okay.
a couple other guys, and there was a character that had like an electric guitar.
That was, yes, dude, I remember. Because I had electric guitar too, and I was like, identify with this.
and there wasn't that many. And then I remember, speaking of EGM, getting an EGM article. There was a review, and then there was like a strategy guide or some tips that came out later. And I had beaten that game, and I had realized I missed like a lot of characters.
Yeah.
Like you can miss a lot of the recruit. Like there was a lot of playable characters you could put in your party.
Yeah.
And man, I missed a lot of them.
Weren't there like tons?
There's a lot. I want to say
Tens and
like
tens?
18 or 20 or something.
Yeah, it was
that.
it was insane. Especially coming from games that you could have typically 3 people in your party, but yet that was like 5 maybe total. You know, on some of these other ones.
Chrono Cross is it's not as legendary as Chrono Trigger.
No, not at all.
I'd say it's almost as good, man.
Could you be the frog in Chrono Cross?
That's Chrono Trigger.
Because I know that's in Chrono Trigger, but I swear I remember
There might be. So
some character.
I'm usually a completionist. I do
Okay.
everything in the game.
Yeah.
But Chrono Cross was a little hard. It was hard. I didn't I never went back. I beat that game once.
Mm-hmm.
I never went back and replayed it and got all the characters and all the secrets.
Okay.
So there might be.
Yeah.
It is technically a spiritual successor to Chrono Trigger.
Sure.
There might be the frog or
They may
some
have
references
brought him.
to the frog that I missed. But
Chrono Trigger, though,
that
game is always on my phone.
Second
the only
greatest
game I will
JRPG
always
ever.
carry in my pocket. I don't care if they discontinue it on iPhone. I will buy a freaking Raspberry Pi and make a damn Chrono Trigger thing to keep in my pocket. That game is insane.
That game is amazing. When did you end up actually playing this?
So I didn't play it, dude. I can tell you exactly when I started playing it. It was when it came out. No, actually, I think I did play it on an emulator before, but maybe not. Regardless, I got into it when I had an iPod Touch in 2012 or 2013.
So you didn't play it
I didn't play it till way
Wow,
later.
yeah.
I never had it on Super Nintendo, but I remember playing. Yeah, it was on an iPod Touch. Shittiest little experience, but it blew my mind, man, because that game, the storyline was incredible.
The storyline, the music, the time travel, everything about that game.
Oh, bouncing back to the dinosaur age.
Yes.
Oh my god.
And the fact that all the endings, so like speaking of, if you go back to the dinosaur age, you don't have to actually complete the prehistoric quest where you go and kill the Lizard King and the dragon.
Okay.
If you don't do that, when you beat the game, the ending, because you never killed the lizard quest, the ending is actually that humans died out and the lizards took over. The game has something I want to say. It's either 13 or 30. I think there's 3. It's either 13 or 30 endings. Has a bunch of multiple endings, and it was one of the first games that the endings depend on what you do and the choices that you make in the game.
Yeah.
And this is originally it was released in like 98, 99 for the Super Nintendo, somewhere around there. And the writing, the concept of multiple endings, time travel, the music. I mean, I have a remix album for Chrono Trigger. Like that game has been remixed so many times because the music, I think, is the best JRPG soundtrack of all time, and it's my second favorite JRPG, second to Suikoden 2, which I'm about to get a tattoo on my wrist for Suikoden 2. My wife, by the way, has been begging me to get a tattoo. Isn't that weird?
Dude, my wife is the same way.
That's so weird.
So weird.
Yeah, she's been. I gotta make sure we're still recording. Yeah.
Yeah, you're
She's been
good.
begging me to get a tattoo, and I think I'm gonna get a Suikoden 2 tattoo. Anyway, Chrono Trigger. I'm interested to hear, how did that game impress? Because you played it way later.
Yeah.
Obviously, still blew your mind, even though it was an old game.
Oh yeah.
Was it the story, mainly the story, that blew your mind? What about it?
Okay, so I loved the characters. Love the characters. I love the whole story with the frog being wasn't he the prince?
Yeah.
So I loved that. I loved the weird mad scientist Luca. I thought that was so awesome. I love the robot that you meet in
the future.
In the future, but then probably the kicker to me that really just glued it all in my head was the time travel. I love when you go to the realm in between time.
Land Beyond Time.
Yeah,
and
Land Beyond Time.
This has it's just like fences and it's all black around it.
Yeah, just that
so mystical.
Yes, that painted such a vivid picture of what is time?
What is time? Yeah.
Could we go back and forward? Could we go to the past and change the future because we messed around with the past, right? Crazy stuff.
There's a really cool ending. So I don't know if you played at the very end of the game, you get a rainbow shell.
Okay.
And the rainbow shell is what allows you to get the best gear in the game.
Uh-huh.
But you can't get all the best gear. You have to choose either to make a weapon or armor out of the rainbow shell. But then you can do New Game Plus, whereas you start the game all over again, but you keep your levels and you keep your gear.
Yes.
And so by playing through the game multiple times, you can end up getting rainbow everything for all your characters.
Yes, I do remember this.
So at the very beginning of the game, when you go to the fair and you first meet the princess, the girl, you run into her at the fair, the pendant drops, pick the pendant up, and then you go to Luca's doing the demonstration with her teleporter.
Uh-huh.
And she goes into the teleporter and she disappears, and you go into the same teleporter to follow her. You get sent back in time, and that kind of sets the game off. If you go into the wrong teleporter, which is on the left side of the screen, you actually fight Lavos immediately, the end boss. But if you're playing the game for the first time, you're just going to die.
Yeah.
And you only have Chrono. There's no one in your party.
Yeah.
Well, if you've done New Game Plus enough, and you're like high enough level and you have all the rainbow gear, you can beat Lavos by yourself just as Chrono.
with the what's
At
the
the
sword?
very beginning of the game. The rainbow
Masu
sword.
or the rainbow sword?
Yeah, the
Okay.
Masamasun is Frog's main,
Right,
the best
okay,
sword.
okay, got
I
it.
think it's rainbow sword, the rainbow helm, the rainbow armor. Anyway, I played through the game a couple times. I had Chrono decked out. Luminaire is his best spell.
Okay.
Easter egg on my remix album for Chrono Trigger. I have this cool like remake of the Luminaire, the spell, and it has like a 6-point star with all the time periods around. I put all this time into the artwork for that remix album. If you check it out, it's like there's like 100 Easter eggs in the artwork for that remix album. Anyway, you beat Lavos, and you can beat Lavos at the very beginning of the game. And when you beat Lavos at the very beginning of the game, you go to the realm of Beyond Time. The ending is you don't watch the ending, you play the ending. And the ending is you go to the land of Beyond Time, whatever it's called, Beyond Time or In Between Time. And there's like little NPCs that represent all the developers of the game.
Okay.
And they like talk to you about like, you were never supposed to see this ending. How did you beat the game so fast? Like they knew it was possible to beat the game.
Yeah.
But like they give you this weird sort of ending where they have all these NPCs and they talk to you as the developers of the game. Basically giving you props for figuring out how to beat Lavos at the very beginning of the game. And that's one of the endings. And I remember thinking like the fact that like that's an ending that maybe less than 1% of players are ever going to get. And but they put it in there. They put it like that game. There's so much love put into that game. I think that's why it's one of the timeless classics.
Oh, absolutely. Do you ever think in like weird times where you're just in your head, do you ever think like, what if that happened in real life? Like, what if you're just sitting there and like you beat the game of life and suddenly you were like, you weren't supposed to see this. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And the sprites are like, ooh.
Speaking of that, I had not a friend, but a friend's friend. So do you remember it was on all over social media in Utah. There's basically a husband and a wife where the husband disappeared. And there was like this big campaign online, and there was kind of like rumors about like why this guy disappeared and maybe he was murdered. And like the friend that was launching the campaign to bring awareness, there was rumors that he actually killed. All that was like bullshit.
Okay.
I have a friend that wasn't friends with the guy, but knew him. Is a coworker.
Okay.
Knew of him, and So take this all with a grain of salt,
Sure.
You and those listening. He said, well, there's two things. One, the dude had an affair and there were some issues with life that maybe he didn't want to pull into, but he was really, really religious, LDS, prominent religion here in Utah, but he got into mushrooms and was doing a bunch of mushrooms.
Okay.
And what I heard through the grapevine, again, this may not be true, but like you said, do you ever think about the game of life? Just someone telling me this story made me think, whether the story's true or not, made me get into this weird mindset. And the story they told me was he did a lot of mushrooms and he was very successful financially, very like basically an overachiever, above average in every aspect of his life. He was very big, very fit, very strong, athletic, very successful door-to-door salesman, very wealthy. And he felt like he'd already figured life out, and he was so sure that there was something beyond. He's like, it's time for me to level up and move on, and he just offed himself.
Wow.
But it wasn't like a depressed suicide.
Yeah.
It was like I've already figured out everything there is to figure out in this life.
It was a graduation.
And just whether that story is true or not, it's probably not true, just the rumor that I heard. But it got me thinking like, well, yeah. And like I didn't think about Chrono Trigger specifically, but this idea of something that exists outside of time.
Yeah.
Because we hear about things online like time is the fourth dimension, right?
Sure.
And it's not constant. It isn't static. Yes, you hear that, but your brain doesn't comprehend it. My brain doesn't comprehend it. Apparently, really smart people into math get it. I sure as hell don't get it.
Sure.
But the concept gets in my brain. I started thinking like, well, yeah, what is? Like, if you do want to level up, maybe death is the next step. And maybe there is this realm beyond time. And what if life, reincarnation, or going back in time, or the idea is like when you see the end of Interstellar, right? That movie blew my mind, right? So at the end of Interstellar, he goes, if you haven't seen, he goes into a black hole, and he sees all of time at once. He's in this like weird string cube, and it's like he's the one that pushing the bookshelf back in the day that started the whole thing off, and he's like trying to talk to his daughter back in time, and like he's seeing all time at once. Just the idea of like maybe death is the pathway to this next realm.
Yeah.
Kind of creeps me out because I don't know if you've ever had this. Ever since I was a kid, sometimes I'll stand at the edge of a cliff and be like, I'm not depressed. I don't want to die, but maybe I should just jump.
Oh, man.
Just to see what happens. Like, just to see what's next.
Sure.
That curiosity, and that same curiosity of like mystical connection to the unknown, that's what that land beyond time, it gave me that feeling as a small kid.
Yeah.
Right? You go to this place outside of time, and just that concept as a small kid, first time I probably thought about that, thought about four-dimensional space, or thought about time is not actually linear. And Chrono Trigger was like that feeling of sort of like breaking your brain.
Yeah.
You can't, that Chrono Trigger is one of the earliest memories. That, and I remember thinking about Celestial Kingdom. For those of you who are not LDS, the idea is that you're going to go to this heaven and live forever, and there's no end, and you're going to progress forever.
Yeah.
And I remember making a microwave. Remember the yellow burritos with the Mexican dude with the hat, the frozen burritos? Yes. I'm sure every kid's had those.
The 10 cents?
Yes. I was doing a microwave burrito, watching it, and I was thinking about forever. Like, if I make it to heaven, if I quit masturbating, I'll make it to heaven, and I'll live forever. There's no end. Like, everything I know has an end. A year ends. There's a cycle. A day ends. 24 hours, 12 hours, a minute, 10 minutes, an hour, a decade, like a generation. Everything ends. And I got scared thinking about eternity. Like, I'm gonna exist forever. I don't know if I want to exist forever. That same feeling of like, oh, my brain is starting to fall apart because I can't comprehend this concept, is the same way I felt when playing Chrono Trigger, and I'm in this place that's called like whatever it is, beyond time or in between time or after time. Well, how can something exist beyond time? And I remember trying to comprehend that as a kid. It just gives you that like sort of that feeling of like your brain breaking. Yeah. That's one of the things I remember from Chrono Trigger.
Yeah, yeah. That land, it always felt serene. Even though it's like dark, there's nothing there. It felt serene because it felt like
there's just like a light, a lamppost, a
couple
rooms.
Yes.
And that's all it is. And then it's just black.
But it's weird because it's like, okay, you're progressing through, there are monsters or robots or whatever you're fighting in whichever, place that you're at. And it felt like everything's moving forward, right? And it feels like suddenly, for a minute, it's not moving forward anymore.
You're outside of this whole linear progression.
Yeah, you're outside kind of like almost looking in just as a spectator, like there's nothing going on. It's quiet.
This place is outside of time. Yeah. It's trippy.
Weird.
I wonder how they actually got that game green lit, and because those are some heady concepts for an SNES game aimed at children that came out in the 90s.
So
what the hell?
That is, I have no idea. But I'm forever grateful for those developers and those designers that were able to get that thing gone and out. Man, speaking of other games like this, not trying to hijack this, but
you want a little bit more?
I'm good, think so. Not trying to hijack this from you, but BioShock. BioShock was another one.
You know what's interesting? So we have a common coworker at the agency we worked at that I historically had some. We've talked about it in the past. Some like subliminal friction with.
Okay.
But he really likes BioShock Infinite.
Yes.
And that was this weird thing we could talk about. He's also very religious, and we disagree on religion. But BioShock Infinite, for those who haven't played, I haven't read into this, but there's no way.
No way.
There's no way they did not reference the birth of Mormonism
No way.
in writing that game.
100%.
There's no way.
100%.
They had to have looked at multiple, because that whole game is like American colonialism sort of distilled, which in that sort of Manifest Destiny, there's actually a really good podcast I've never listened to before. Shout out to the Last Podcast on the Left.
Okay.
Like, they've been around forever. Apparently they're famous. I just barely got into them because they're doing a 5-part series on the history of Mormonism.
Really?
And it's really, really good. Like it's like they do history, then they had these little comedy sketches in between. And it's more like Radiolab. It's not a podcast like this. It's more produced.
Okay, got it.
The comedy parts are sort of like hit and miss for me.
Sure.
But they did their research. They went all the way through No Man Knows My History by Fawn Brody. They all read Rough Stone Rolling.
Yep.
They did a bunch of other stuff. And what they talk about is in the beginning of America, I didn't really think about this, even all the history I've done into Mormonism, is the concept of a free-for-all for religion was brand new. Before, religion was usually connected to you had your state religion, Catholicism, Protestantism, the Church of England, whatever. And the Mormonism was like, Joseph Smith came, it had only been like, I think they said like 70 years or 60 years since America had been founded. Okay. And so we had this like wide open sort of wild, wild west of like, there's no such thing as a state religion. And anyone can be a quote unquote entrepreneur or a priest or a preacher. And you have this like weird mix of like America. It wasn't just, Mormonism believes that America was divine and the founding of America was inspired by God. But it's not just Mormonism. That was like an American belief in general.
Sure.
And so this whole like Manifest Destiny, American colonial, like that's all in BioShock Infinite. So it's not just Mormonism, but Comstock and like the whole...
The Prophet.
There's the prophets. Like, there's no way that they didn't look into Joseph Smith a little bit.
There's no way.
There's no way.
No way. Playing that game... That's exactly the feeling that I had. That's exactly the just everything through the whole thing. Just subtle. And a lot of them are really subtle, right? So, oh man, I'd have to go back through to pull out all of the different details. But starting with the come with us into the waters of baptism.
Dude, the opening scene with the baptism. Yeah. Oh my gosh.
And the ending scene with the baptism.
And the ending scene. Yes.
Yeah, man. Beginning to end.
Oh my gosh.
Alpha and Omega. It is nutty.
It is nutty. That opening scene. So the first time I played it, you like, well, I guess technically it's not the opening scene. You start on the boat, you go to the tower.
Yep.
The tower takes you up, and then you end up in this baptismal font with all these statues and candles, and you're wading through water.
The flowers in the water. Singing. Yeah.
And it was like, it was so, it just hit this place, and then you end up getting baptized, and then you go through the baptismal font, and you go into the city, and then everything's, and it is growing up being LDS and knowing us going on a mission and being, I was sort of the missionary that dealt with a lot of anti-Mormon stuff, so I was pretty well versed in Mormon history, or at least the pro-church version of Mormon history. Mm-hmm. But even with that, it's very obvious that the American exceptionalism and divine America was a big part of Nauvoo and Kirtland. And when you get to what's the city? Columbia?
Yeah, Columbia.
Columbia. Mm-hmm. When you get to Columbia, I'm like, oh, this is Nauvoo in the air, basically. Remember what I'm thinking. I'm like, this is cool.
But that's what Nauvoo was supposed to be.
That's what Nauvoo was supposed to be.
Away from all the persecution. It was this walled garden that, we can do what we want, but yet...
Nauvoo was the swamp originally, right?
Yeah.
I get Kirtland and Nauvoo mixed up. Nauvoo originally was a swamp. Yep. They drained the swamp. No one wanted to live there.
Yep.
I mean, there's a lot of hard work to make that city happen.
Totally.
Yeah, that game... And there's even a time travel mechanic in that game.
Yes, there's a really good time travel mechanic in that game. Dude, you know what's even crazier? Now that we're talking about this, I'm remembering that story, with the lighthouse, which is so BioShock in all the games, right?
Yeah.
But when you get to that lighthouse, it's weird because it's almost like taking Booker. Like he doesn't want to go, like against his will, right?
Yes.
He gets in the sea and he gets blasted out. It's almost like blasted into this hyper religious, hyper, zealous
yes
group that he can't really control, right? It's crazy. And
But then he turns out to be Comstock himself. Spoiler alert, the game's like 10 years old. Shut up. If you haven't played it, I don't care.
If you haven't played it, man, you're probably not going to.
You're probably not going to. You should, though.
You should.
You should.
You
anyway,
should.
one of the memories I have with that game is it was like a bonding point with a coworker that normally felt a little like there was some like unsaid tension always.
Got it.
But we could bond on BioShock.
Sure.
So it was like, oh, we at least had this common ground with BioShock.
Which is so weird because I anticipate it was bonding on BioShock with, you're bonding on two different sides of the same coin.
Yes.
Which is interesting. But
that's why I like that game. It kind of helped me like navigate some of those waters. Like, hey, I don't know how to, but like, hey, we can talk about BioShock and video games. You know what I mean? Like, and help me like. And I liked that he liked that.
Yeah.
Because that was like a common ground. And and I remember him talking about how like blown away. You know what? I mean, I don't know how much you want to get into it, but sometimes it's like how it's almost like with the parents and not like letting games sort of get a free pass versus movies and music in our childhood growing up.
Sure.
People can be exposed to things that should make your mind question other things in your life, but they don't.
Okay.
Like, I don't understand how you could grow up and be a really devout member of the LDS Church, play BioShock, and have that not make you sort of think about your own church's history.
Sure. Yeah, it's weird. It's the subtle numbness that you have towards some things.
Yeah.
I thought about this a lot. So like you mentioned, we live in Austin, Texas now. And we recently went up to Waco and went to the David Koresh compound where all of the Branch Davidians went down.
Oh, how was that?
It was crazy.
Was it creepy?
So you know what's crazy is at first, and this is
Tell people what that is if they don't know what it is.
So David Koresh, he was a member of the Seventh-day Adventist Church, and he broke off, and I'm sorry if I'm getting all the details, or not all the details correct. I'll get the vast majority, and I'll paraphrase so that I don't have to get too specific, but essentially, David Koresh then wanted to create his own sect of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. Anyway, they created this big compound in Waco, Texas, and long story short, it ended with a big government standoff, a shootout. There's a lot of conspiracies around a lot of the smaller details and everything with that as well. But David Koresh, he became this kind of cult icon, right? Where he was like this prophet, or self-professed prophet. But just like most evil men, when they get power, they started to do all these evil things, right? Started to have sexual relations with all these women.
Why does that always happen?
Why does it always happen,
like,
Cade?
It's just not just the LDS Church. It's like every community, small cult to big to Catholicism, everything in between.
Sure.
Secret sex and profits,
and money, getting money
go hand in hand,
just generating money. So anyway, that happened. So you ask, like, was it creepy? We're all products of our own biases. So we get there, and it's pretty beautiful landscape. We get there, and we're like, oh man, this is so beautiful. But there's these big gates, and we went in, and in our heads we're like, oh, this is so creepy. This is so creepy. It wasn't creepy. We were just in our freaking heads saying it was creepy. Because once we actually went down to where kind of some of the ruins are, and there's a church there. It's like the only structure that's still
there.
That plot where the compound was, and this lady came out, and she was just like, "Hey, how are you guys doing?" And we started talking to her, and we were kind of like, we'll ask for forgiveness if we're not supposed to be here. Like, we weren't doing anything bad. We just wanted to take a look around.
Just check it out, yeah.
And we didn't think anybody was there. And she came out. Nicest lady ever. Nicest lady you'll ever meet. And we're like, hey, well, let's hook her up because they have like a donation thing. So we gave her $20. She was so grateful. She's like, hey, let me give you a tour of the church.
Oh,
she toured us
sweet.
around. She gave us the insider scoop, right? And the insider scoop was very interesting. It was this conspiracy theory. I say conspiracy theory just because I'm from the outside looking in, but really her perspective was, look, David Koresh he was an evil dude, and he kind of pulled the curtain over all of our eyes. But the government was what was at, like, the bad force here, right? They drove like trucks or a tank into the side, and of the compound had killed a bunch of children. They
they're
didn't
covering,
need
yeah.
to. They didn't
I've
need
heard
to
all-
just shoot
yeah.
in. You know, they could have captured David Koresh when he was on his run. Anyway, all that conspiracy theory stuff. But one of the weirdest findings was, one, we're always looking to confirm our beliefs, right? So like when we went there, we're like, oh, this is creepy, right? It wasn't creepy. It was actually quite a spiritual place, right? See, Seventh-day Adventist people were great people, right? Most of them. This lady was
99% of them.
Sure.
Good people.
Kinda
just
like-
being kind of
yeah, like
taken advantage. Not take. Yeah, manipulated. I guess would
Sure.
be the way to say it.
Yeah, absolutely. Which with many belief systems, you know, when someone goes corrupt or whatever, most of the people, they mean well.
Yes.
But then it's that whole confirming your bias thing, which I think comes back to what you were saying, where with like video games or whatever it is, sometimes you don't want to see that, you know, you don't want to see the parallels. You don't want to play BioShock and say, that's confirming, like, this seems a lot like, you know, whatever, Joe Smith
Yeah.
or whatever. You see, hey, that's interesting, or oh, that's cool, you know, oh, they paid homage to Joseph Smith, like this is
Yeah.
a positive thing, right? Instead of seeing it as, oh, he's actually kind of throwing a dagger out there, Levine
Yeah.
is, right? maybe,
Yeah,
who knows?
Comstock seems, and BioShock, he seems like a hybrid of Joseph Smith, Jim Jones, any sort of early American cult leader mixed with like time travel and sci-fi.
Yeah.
That game,
Yeah. And steampunk.
steampunk, yes,
Steampunk
yes,
everything.
yes. Steampunk everything.
So good. So good. With that giant bird,
Yep.
that thing was so
And
cool.
like you go inside like the giant statue of Comstock to save the girl.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. But what I liked about that was the whole, and I think this is kind of the central premise of probably all the BioShock games. I've never played two.
I've
or the
only
second
played one in Infinite.
Yeah, I've only played
yeah.
one in Infinite, and then a little bit on the DLCs from Infinite. But what I like about it is the illusion of choice. Right? It's all centered around this illusion of choice. For instance, in Infinite, you've got, you can
that
choose the
couple
bird
that
or the
has-
cage,
The
right?
couple that has the chalkboard,
Yes.
and they're like, you're going through and you think you're
They're
choosing.
like, oh,
but
77th time, you
Yes,
still chose
yes,
this one
yes,
or
yes,
whatever,
yes,
right?
yes.
Because that's the whole premise. They're dicking around with time trying to figure out, like, is he going to choose the same stuff? Is he going to choose different stuff? You know, like, it's all about that illusion of choice, right? You think that you're choosing your own path, but in reality, in the end, you're one and the same. You're Booker and you're Comstock at the same time.
You're at the same time. That actually reminds me. On my mission, I served the mission for the LDS Church, which is like basically you go out for 2 years and try to baptize people and join the church. I would do this lesson on faith, which was I learned a magic trick, and I picked it up from another missionary. But the magic trick is you take a deck of cards, and you show them the bottom 4 cards, and you put them at the bottom of the deck. And then you put the bottom 4 cards down on the table. But when you're putting them down, you for those you can't see, basically you slide the bottom card out of the way, which is their card. So you say, pick a card. They pick a card, say it's the King of Hearts.
Okay.
And you put the King of Hearts as the 4th card from the bottom.
Okay.
And then you put the first card down, you put the second card down, and then you put the and you show them each card. And on the third card, you show them the bottom card, which is not the King of Hearts. It's whatever is at the top.
Uh-huh.
So and then when you go to put the card down, you slide it out of the way, and you actually put the King of Hearts down.
Okay.
So they think, let's say the card on top of the King of Hearts is the Jack of Spades. They think you're putting the Jack of Spades onto the table, but you're
Okay.
really putting the card that they picked, King of Hearts, down.
Got it.
And then you put another card down. So, and then you say, you saw all 4 cards before I put them on the table. None of them were your card, which is you don't know what it is at the time doing the trick, but in their mind they're thinking my card's the King of Hearts, and you say I showed you all 4 cards before I put them onto the table.
Uh-huh.
And they say, yes. Is your card one of the cards on the table? No. And I'm like, well, you should believe me. I'm telling you your cards on the you should have faith. So the idea is faith is sort of like believing in something, even though your senses sort of, which is kind of messed up now that I think about it. I tell people this. Like, don't trust your own intuition. But it worked really well at the time. It's basically saying your eyes are telling you that the card is not on the table, but I'm
Okay.
telling you the card is on the table. Even though I tricked them, it is on the table. So once you do that, Then you have 4 cards on the table. You make sure that you pick up their card, which in this case is the King of Hearts, second. So you pick up one card, you put the second card, and do the same thing again. You show them the bottom card, which again is some other card.
Okay.
And then when you got to put it down, you use your finger, you slide the bottom card out, and you actually put the second card on the table.
Okay.
So again, their card is King of Hearts that's now on the table again, but they think that card being put on the table is some other card. Then you show them the 3 other cards, and if they're savvy, they'll realize that they saw one card twice. Nobody ever notices. And so now you say you've seen all 4 cards 2 times.
Okay.
And you've never seen your card. In their mind, it's the King of Hearts. I'm telling you that your card is on the table. They're like, no, it's not. You got to have faith in me because I'm the prophet, or I'm the symbolism of God, or whatever. I'm telling you that despite what your eyes tell you, that your card is on the table. Like, no, it's not. I've seen all 4 cards twice. So this is where the illusion of choice comes from. Then what you say is pick 2 cards. Now, what you want at the end of the day is you want their card to be the last card. So if they pick 2 cards, they say, I want this one and this one. If it's the ones they pick, then you take the other cards away. They just assume that the way the game works is whatever they pick stays. But if they pick the 2 cards that are not their card, you take them away, then they assume whatever you pick gets taken away. So they think that they're choosing what stays on the table or what doesn't stay on the table, but they're really not. No matter what they choose, either you're going to take 2 cards away, you're either going to take the 2 away that they picked or keep the 2 that they picked.
Got it.
Either way, they're going to think they're choosing. And then you say, pick 1 card. There's only 2 left. If they pick the card that is their card, you take the other card away. If they pick the card that isn't their card, you take that card away still. So no matter what they choose, the last card that's left is their card.
Yeah.
Then you flip the card, and they're the first time I saw this trick, I thought it was some satanic shit. Like, I was like, this is impossible. I saw all 4 cards twice.
Yeah.
And I picked all the cards, and somehow my card ended up.
Yeah.
And that illusion of choice, I remember thinking, like, even as a missionary, oh, okay, so they think they're choosing stuff, but really I'm sort of gamifying this whole thing, and I'm in charge the whole time. I'm in complete control. That's the same thing with BioShock.
Yeah.
Is you think that you're making choices, but the game is going to lead you where it leads and give you the illusion of choice. And then that, again, why that game is so impactful. If you're older when you play that game came out later, so I was old enough to start thinking about it. I'm like, well, it makes me think about Sam Harris and his argument of determinism. Like, is my free will an illusion? Am I really choosing things, or is this all being funneled down to something? Just like this card trick I did on my mission.
Yeah.
And I don't have the answer, but
sure,
the fact that games can sort of put you into that mind space and make you think like that, and really, the fact that a video game can make you question the nature of your reality. It's a good video game.
It's a really good video game. And that's not even taking into consideration just the playability and replayability of it too, right? There's so many, I mean, it's crazy how complex to be able to nail that story.
How do you design something like that? Yeah.
In addition to everything else, in addition to the insanely beautiful graphics, the immersive world, the music, man, I have no idea.
What's the guy's name that's over BioShock? He's famous.
Levine?
Kevin Levine.
Kevin Levine?
I remember him talking about BioShock Infinite almost got scrapped. One of the issues he was talking about was the rail system.
Okay,
And for some reason, I can't remember what the technical difficulty, because that game originally came out on PS3, Xbox 360. Not super powerful consoles, and something about bringing in, like, connecting the world together and keeping what was actually playable at the time small enough for the memory size, but still being able to move on the rail system fast. Something about that, I remember him talking about, almost broke the game. And they almost had to, like, either give up the game or drastically change the game. Yeah. Luckily they didn't. They figured it out, and it's one of the greatest games ever made. Good. But yeah, shout out to, if you haven't played BioShock Infinite, or really any of the I haven't played 2.
Even the first one. The first one's great with Fontaine.
Yes.
And Atlas.
And the underwater world. Yeah.
So good. So good.
That also has a great opening when your plane crashes. next to this, again, a lighthouse. Mm-hmm. You get in the elevator, you go down to this like ruined underwater world, and you're in the initial pod, and the person is talking to you over the intercom, and one of the creepers is like trying to get in the pod.
Splicers.
Splicers.
Yeah.
And you're just sitting there like, I have no weapons. And yeah, that game, I haven't played 2 though.
Yeah, I've not played 2 either.
And I know it didn't get the greatest reviews, but you play as a big daddy.
Yeah.
In 2, apparently.
I hear that the gameplay is actually more fun because you can dual wield in Infinite it's salts. In the first one it's plasmids.
It's plasmids, yes.
So you can dual wield plasmids and weapons and stuff. It's crazy. So I hear the fight system's better. But I've never played it because I hear the story sucks, as compared to.
I don't think Levine was part of 2.
Really?
I think 2K Games has published it. I think he was working on Infinite when another team developed 2. Maybe he was like an executive producer. I have to double check on that. But yeah, that game is. Did you play it on PC originally, or was it a console?
PC, man, for sure. That was actually one big reason why when we built those PCs, I was so interested. I wanted to play Infinite on 4K, just max settings.
I don't know if it's been changed now, but Infinite, there's one issue with playing Infinite in 4K. The text doesn't scale. So all the subtitles in the UI is so small you can't see it. And I have bad hearing, so I need those subtitles to be able to understand. And I think I remember finding a mod on Nexus Mods where it'll upscale the text, but I had to go through some modding. It wasn't too hard, but getting that was one issue. But it looks great in 4K.
Yeah, so I've never actually, unfortunately, I still haven't played it in 4K
because you don't have a
4K monitor.
Yeah.
But I played at max settings in 1080p, and it's still gorgeous. So it's just a great game from A to Z.
Anything else on PS1 that stands out to you? It's like a influential game.
Anything else? Oh, man, PS1 had all of the influential games. Crash Bandicoot.
Yeah, they just released the remake of Crash Bandicoot 1, 2, and 3, I think.
Yeah,
or at least 1. But they re-released a remaster on PS4 of all the Crash Bandicoots. Or at least 1.
Bandicoot was, Tomb Raider?
Tomb Raider, man.
Tomb Raider 2. Such a good game.
Is Tomb Raider 2 the one that has the dinosaur, or is Tomb Raider 1?
No, Tomb Raider 1 I think had the dinosaur.
Has the T-Rex.
Tomb Raider 2, that was one that I got from a demo disc. Was Tomb Raider 2. And I remember it was the best, I can't remember exactly where it is, but it feels like, some European city. You go through, you kill all the guards, and you go to the top, and then you have to run and you jump out and jump over onto the tops of the buildings and stuff to unlock different things. And then you swan dive off into the water. You can go under and get your boat. It's the first boat that you get in the game. You're just cruising around.
I remember Tomb Raider and those triangle boobs.
Those triangle boobs and short shorts.
At the time, it was like, she's so hot. And you go look at the game now, how did that ever turn me on as a small child? But this is something we brought up on the podcast, too. If you grew up pre-internet era, your exposure to anything sexual was basically nothing.
It was basically triangle boobs.
Triangle boobs. I would steal the lingerie section from the Kmart ads. You had nothing.
You took what you could get.
And I remember, speaking of a sort of bad publicity, that game got a little bit of heat because of her proportions.
Oh,
She's
yeah.
Short-shirted, big-tittied. But when you actually look at the game, come on, man. They're just 2 pointed triangles, and the graphics are so rudimentary. But the flip side is, I do remember thinking she was hot.
Yeah.
As a kid.
Yeah. Yeah. The game designers nailed it to ship enough games, or just a bajillion games out there.
Do you remember Dead or Alive?
I remember Dead or Alive, and I do remember
first game with jiggling boobs.
With jiggling. Dead or Alive.
Yeah.
I remember. I don't know if I ever actually played it that much. I had a friend that had Dead or Alive. Which one was that on? Was that a Dreamcast?
I think it was originally Dreamcast and PS2.
Yeah, I think I remember playing that one on Dreamcast a little bit. Man.
Did you have a Dreamcast or a friend had it?
No, I didn't. But a funny thing about Dreamcast is I had a friend that had a Dreamcast, and I remember when it came out, this guy was a classic bullshit artist, and he would tell me, he was like, oh, yeah, you can come over and play Dreamcast, but we can only play for 45 minutes. I'm like, okay, that's crazy. Why? And he's like, we can only play for 45 minutes because the graphics are so good, it will mess your brain up if you play for longer than 45 minutes. Now I know he's just an asshole and wanted me to leave his house so he could play.
Your brain's
by
going to blow. He just didn't want to share his Dreamcast.
He's like, you'll get sick if you play for more than 45 minutes.
Because the graphics, I do remember seeing some of the pre-hype for that game. Again, I had an EGM subscription, and I remember specifically an EGM article talking about Madden.
Okay.
And it was comparing PlayStation 1 polygon count for the average Madden player on the team versus the Dreamcast. And the big headline was there was more polygons in the foot of a single player on the Dreamcast version of Madden than an entire player on the PS1.
Okay.
That's how powerful it was.
Yeah.
Then I saw some initial previs for Sonic's Adventure on Dreamcast, and I was like, I didn't know video games could look so awesome.
Totally.
And I remember telling my parents that I wanted it. They're like, we just got you a PlayStation. And it was $500.
Yes.
And they wouldn't give me the Dreamcast. I wanted it. But luckily, I mean, it depends on whether... So I had John Jimenez on, who's like this artist guy that was on a couple episodes ago, and he got the Dreamcast launch. And up until the Wii and now the Switch, up before those two consoles, it's weird. Dreamcast was the fastest selling console of all time prior to the Wii.
Okay.
But it also was Sega abandoned it within 2 years.
Jeez.
So it was like this crazy skyrocket, then crazy downfall.
Okay.
And people who are Dreamcast like fans are like the way I look at PS1 is like the greatest time. There's a lot of people that Dreamcast is, and I think that the fact that it died so quickly makes it sort of has this cult following.
Yeah.
It's a collector's item.
It's like Donnie Darko.
Don't we? Okay, let's talk about Donnie Darko.
Oh, shit.
Oh, no. Sidetrack, Donnie Darko. So my drum teacher, bless his soul, Mike Dell. Shout out to Mike Dell if you want to learn how to play drums. He's the best teacher in Utah. I'm pretty fucking good at drums, thanks to him. He was also like my second dad, and he would introduce me to good movies and games as well. And he first told me about 13 Monkeys, which is this Bruce Willis.
Oh, yeah, man.
Time travel movie, which is awesome. If you haven't seen 13 Monkeys.
Another cult classic.
Classic.
Totally.
And he also talked to me about Donnie Darko, which I initially loved. And I was, so Donnie Darko is like sort of the movie person that movie people recommend. And if you're into movies and you say like Donnie Darko, like true movie guys will be like, that's like saying you think Final Fantasy VII is the greatest JRPG of all time.
Sure.
Like I will, if you say you think Final Fantasy VII is the greatest JRPG, I'm going to judge you immediately. And people would judge me for saying, I think Donnie Darko is a cool indie movie.
Sure.
And I used to think like, they're just being haters.
Okay.
Because Donnie Darko, again, we were talking about Chrono Trigger and that mystical sort of time travel, put your head in this weird place that you can't comprehend the concepts that it's sort of bringing into your consciousness. Donnie Darko definitely does that. Mm-hmm. But now in hindsight, reading more about, what's his name, Richard... Oh,
man, I can't remember.
But he did Southland Tales.
I was going to say, have you seen Southland Tales?
Southland Tales, which is weird and kind of shitty.
Yeah.
But I kind of liked Southland Tales.
Okay.
It has, what's his face, Stifler.
Okay.
Stifler's in Southland Tales.
Yeah.
I think a lot of Donnie Darko's genius was by accident.
I agree. I fully agree.
I think it's a good movie, but I think it was sort of luck that turned that movie. It's a great movie.
Sure.
But I don't think it's as genius as a director, architect in building this thing. I think he had some great ideas and sort of the right things fell into place. First off, the soundtrack for Donnie Darko.
So good.
So good.
Duran Duran.
It has when
Notorious.
they first. What's the song when they first get to the school? Danny
Elfman, Oingo Boingo, right?
Oingo Boingo. I think that's what it is.
Yes.
That song.
Or Echo and the Bunnymen?
Maybe that's. I have to look it up.
But yeah, that's yeah. It was one of those. I think it's Echo and the Bunnymen. Anyway, yes, incredible soundtrack.
Incredible soundtrack.
So
good.
But
and it talks about again. We're back on time travel, and it was also one of the first movies that had CGI. Remember when he sees the vision of sort of the blob coming out of people's chest?
Yep.
Which is almost exactly like the alien in. Have you ever seen The Abyss?
Oh, I have, dude. I saw that way young.
Way young. So
Way young,
that was one of the
yes.
first movies that had CGI, and the alien in the abyss is sort of this liquid, clear liquid, almost the
Yes.
exact same effect. I don't remember which movie came first,
Uh-huh.
but again, early CGI, which I think is Silicon Knights Rare. They were some of the early 3D stations were. It's the same technology they were using to make Donkey Kong Country.
Okay.
Anyway, that movie, like something about the soundtrack and the story and sort of just enough mysticism and time travel that I think what ended up happening is the way people filled in the blanks made it seem much more genius. And maybe that is the genius of the movie. Maybe I should give him more credit.
Yeah.
Whatever his name is, Richard something. That's
Richard
like,
Kelly?
Kelly. Yes,
Yeah.
Richard Kelly.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm back and forth on that movie. I used to think it was one of the greatest movies ever. Then I went through the phase where it was like, this movie's nothing but dumb luck. Now I'm somewhere back to the middle.
I need to watch it again, to be completely honest, because I was the same way. I was like, this is the best movie in college. Loved it. And then it didn't age well. I tried to watch it again. I was like, this is the stupidest movie ever. And so I think I've done the rebound kind of like you. I need to watch it again.
You should watch it again.
Yeah.
It's there's one iconic scene that I like is when the two siblings are arguing at the
dinner table?
At the dinner table, and the little girl's like, they said, "Why don't you go suck a fuck?" And the little girl's like, and it kind of goes silent, and the parents don't know how to act. Like, our son just told our daughter to go suck a fuck, and the little kid, what does suck a fuck mean?
Yep.
Classic.
So many. Shut up. That scene?
Yes.
That was classic. Man, some of those were dark though. Some of the dark
I think there
themes.
are elements like it did capture sort of an exaggerated version of white suburb life.
Totally.
It's sort of
Totally
the like we could talk about this. Like, I'm experiencing it now, whereas I have everything I ever wanted. I have all the toys, all the gear. I have my man cave. I have successful business. Everything's better than it's ever been, but I have a looming sense of unsatisfaction that I'm trying to figure out. Like they say, money isn't happiness.
Sure.
Not that I'm super wealthy, but everything that I wanted in my 20s, I've accomplished and I've gotten. And that same thing they sort of play out like the quality of life in the suburbs in the 80s and the 90s is great. Like everything's perfect. You have the white picket fence, you have the yard, your kids are going to school. Everything on the surface seems all right, but nobody's all right.
Sure.
Right? There's no war, there's no starvation, there's no famine, but people are in a way more messed up. And that's what Donnie Darko sort of, what I will give credit to, aside from the time travel stuff, is that feeling of like uneasiness, right?
Yes.
There's something wrong in the neighborhood. There's something wrong with the way we're living our lives. And like we're searching, and I don't know, there's something about that going to school and the bully. Like, he just hit that. Obviously, that's a problem people have been feeling way before our generation, right? Because when that movie came out, we were little.
Totally.
Little.
Totally. I think it's kind of that same vibe and the same theme with Edward Scissorhands too, right?
Yes.
Because it's like
Good.
It's like great, beautiful suburbs. Like just the visual aspect of that film is like all these houses that are brightly colored. They're cookie cutter, but yet you've got this monster that's kind of looming, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Also, Pleasantville. You remember seeing Pleasantville?
No, I haven't.
I think, is that Jim? I don't know. Jim Carrey is the other one where he's the Truman Show. No, Pleasantville is where the whole movie's in black and white.
Okay.
And they live in this like perfect neighborhood, cookie cutter.
Uh-huh.
But as they sort of they sin, they do things that are not pleasant. The not color comes back in. So one of the first characters, I think either she fornicates or she's married and she commits adultery. It has something to do with sex.
Okay.
All of a sudden she's in color.
Okay.
And she can perceive color, but everyone else can't perceive color.
Interesting.
And it's hitting on like everything's perfect, but it's not perfect when everything's perfect. Which The Matrix hits on. Remember when Neo meets the architect and he said initially we made like a perfect world, but people rejected it?
Sure.
I think that, there's been a lot of...
Yeah.
Anyway, BioShock Infinite hits on that same...
Totally.
That same note. Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah, Donnie Darko.
Man, Sorry to tangent us.
Tangent's fine.
Throw it us off.
We've go off on tangent. That's the whole point. I mean, initially, when I first brainstormed the podcast, the first idea was like, hey, let's do a podcast called Gaming Memories, where I bring on people who aren't necessarily gamers themselves, but are interesting or creative in their own right. It's like, right, you, this marketing genius. Let's talk about video games and maybe try to connect how video games impacted you into why you're a professional marketer at this point. But then I thought, you could do the same thing with music.
Sure.
Interview people about the music that impacted them growing up. You could do the same thing with movies.
Okay.
Then I thought, like, maybe we'll call the podcast Media Memories. I bought the domain for all four, by the way. So anyone wants to steal my idea, joke's on you. I own the domain, bitches. But I said, like, let's just stick with gaming. It'd be too much.
Yeah.
But I'm okay going off because really what I'm interested in is, like, what media. Gaming for me is, like, the biggest part of gaming's and music are sort of tied.
Sure.
Movies and TV shows would be second.
Yeah.
But all those things really impacted us. And for me, my drum teacher being this secondary father figure, so cool, is amazing at drums, and him recommending these movies, right? Donnie Darko's R, 12 Monkeys is R, and I'm like, these things, and I would watch them without my parents knowing, but I was rebelling, and I was cool. I was watching the cool shit that no one's ever heard about.
Yeah.
It really gave me a sense of, like, okay, because you have to have a hobby growing up. I identified as a gamer, but being a gamer was not cool.
Sure.
So getting really good at drums gave me some confidence, right? I'm not that cool kid, but I'm better than all of you guys at drums.
Yeah.
And if I get in front of a drum set, I'm going to blow your guys' mind because I'm fast and I have good chops. And the fact that that sort of father figure, was not introducing games, but introducing movies to me. And then that sort of, those movies kind of get buried into your identity. I think it's important, and I think if you grew up from all the way, probably, when did TV get in households? Was it the 60s?
I'm not gonna know any better.
Before TV, we had
Not
like
history,
radio
dude.
shows. People would sit around the radio, listening to radio shows. Ever since there was like some sort of media in the home, those media experiences have been shaping people.
Yeah.
Right. And that's a big part of how our culture develops. And that's what I'm most, like, long story short, with the podcast. Yes, it's a gaming podcast, but I really want to explore how these things affect, how these media experiences affect people's perceptions as an individual. Then all those individuals make a whole, and that's now shaping our culture. And really, like, if you ask the question, how has video games shaped our culture? Some people might say, well, they're causing mass shootings. Sure. Probably not. But they are impacting our culture. In a way, like, I know for me, video games have impacted everything from the music that I make, what interests me, what concepts interest me, what type of stories interest me. And those things maybe not directly, but are indirectly affecting how I interact with other people, how I raise my kids, how I'm a husband. Probably, if I really wanted to think about it, they probably impact the way I go about marketing in, like, a very indirect way.
Yeah.
But it all kind of gets tumbled together in, like, a primordial soup of just creativity.
Yeah.
All the inputs you've had in your life, growing up, environment, religion, culture, media, movies, gaming, music.
Yeah.
I mean, I've been on this. Do you listen to Tool at all?
A little bit. They just came out with their
new song, and the new album's coming out, and all their stuff's on Spotify. So I've been on this Tool kick for like 3 weeks, 4 weeks. Nothing but Tool for like a solid month. And it's bringing me back to when I was a kid listening to Tool. And you know how things can... your memories are there. You can't remember them unless something... Like you said with Cool Borders. I would have never... ever remembered Cool Borders unless you brought it up. Yeah. But as soon as you said Cool Borders, like 6, 7 memories pop up of me playing Cool Borders. Yeah. It's the same way with, I don't know where we're going with this. Anyway, the point is, it's okay if we went off on a tangent with Donnie Darko and music, because gaming's the focus, but really music and movies all play into the same idea.
Yeah. You know, it's crazy. Thinking about this, you know, when we were talking before, you know, you're mentioning, hey, well, it's interesting to see how these things shape you, right? As you get older, as you choose a career path or a vocation, and then kind of as you continue to progress. And at first I was like, shit, like I have no connection. But as you're talking about this, it's interesting because through these games and through this media, we learn how to tell stories, and we learn how to kind of, because really,
it all comes down to stories.
It comes down to those stories, right? And for marketing, that's what we're doing. We're telling stories, right?
Absolutely.
We're shaping perception of, hey, this product's good. Hey, this product sucks. Hey, we're reputation management. We're doing all these. We're shaping perception, right?
That's exactly what you're doing.
And that's, I think, you mentioned how looking at video games and how all of that has shaped our perception. Man, this has been on my mind lately, is looking at the current state of just online, particularly social media, but pretty much everything online, and how that's shaping our societies, right? So I know this is nothing new, and I'm not necessarily the expert at this particularly, but I've noticed a lot lately with, I'll see someone share something on Facebook, right? So like I had a friend that shared something, and it was like a picture of George Washington, and it was some bullshit quote, and then it was like tag George Washington, right? So it kind of has this sense of credibility because it's next to George Washington, it's next to his name. But then I've noticed Facebook now has these things underneath where it says hoax, and it's like, this actually is bullcrap, and it links to a Snopes article that has more sources.
I've never seen that.
So I've seen this recently, and I've seen this on YouTube too. Just the other day I searched, I've heard a lot about like the Trilateral Commission, and I was like, man, I don't really know what that is. So I searched on YouTube thinking, someone will give me a quick TLDR in 5 minutes, which it will be a lot more comprehensive than an article, and it'll be easier to listen to. But I searched it. I couldn't find any recent videos. I couldn't find anything like that was good, that was actually kind of trying to be an unbiased perspective. But then it linked to Encyclopedia Britannica. And so it was just like, it was trying to cut through all of like this like weird pseudoscience thought that has typically cropped up in search engines, on YouTube, on social media, where people just perpetuate this bullshit without fact checking, right? Anyway, so this has been on my mind, that like that crafts our perceptions, that crafts the world, right? If, Joe Blow down the street is on Facebook all day long, playing, Facebook games or playing games on their phone, they're always just like looking at Facebook, and they're not reading articles or checking sources. They're just digesting this information. Then they're making decisions like voting. Then they're making decisions on how they want to raise their kids.
They're getting crafted a story in their mind.
Exactly.
And we live our lives based on the story that we think reality follows.
100%. It's the illusion of the choice. Back to BioShock. It's, you have a choice, but really there's so many unseen factors. Like if you've dug deep into Cambridge Analytica, where they were literally pulling not literally, they're figuratively pulling the strings on societies, crafting opinion.
Have you read about the IRA, the Internet Research Agency?
Not really, no.
So that was they've done a handful of investigations, and there was a journalist, I forget your name, sorry, but she's been on multiple podcasts, Sam Harris.
With the Russian bots. Yes.
So it's like it was a marketing agency in America that was really just funded by Russian money, and instead of having traditional clients, all they did was make basically, and for those that think like Russia supported Trump, no, these assholes were making pages for extreme left, extreme right, and everything in between. They weren't supporting anyone. Their only motive was to create discontent among the American population. So, for example, one of the examples is they I might get the details wrong, but the concept is the same. They set up a rally across the street. So they basically they create these pages that put out a bunch of memes and thought. So extreme right, extreme left. They had an anti-Muslim get together scheduled across the street from a pro-LGBTQ, something along the lines of that. Two opposing, a hard right get together. I don't know if the details are right, but they had a hard right get together and a hard left get together, organized across the street from each other.
Sure.
They show up. What happens? Violence breaks out. Surprise, surprise. And then this internet agency, this digital marketing agency, which we're both involved in. I have my own company. You do your own shit on marketing. Like, it was all just manipulating social thought and not specifically supporting a left candidate or a right candidate, but really just trying to drive people farther apart. And my thought with that is, okay, so we're talking about stories and narratives. You think about, have you heard of Joseph Campbell?
Absolutely.
And all his work with the, all right? And Jordan Peterson talks about
The hero's journey.
Yeah, the hero's journey, and he takes the Bible from a psychological perspective. Anyway, the hero's journey and narratives have been basically the framework in which humans view the world, right? Some sort of narrative. That's the framework in which we perceive reality around us. Is we have to tell a story. We have a story about ourselves. We have a story about who we are and our past. That can be good or bad. When you go online, if you're like far left and you get sucked into that, then you're going to get told this story that's like an alternate reality. If you're far right, you're going to get told another story that's an alternate reality. And there's almost like two different movies are playing. And people are living in the same world, but they're perceiving a completely different reality. One in which Trump is Hitler, and one in which Trump is Luke Skywalker, basically.
Totally.
And then everything in between, right? Those are the two extremes. I don't know what the truth is, but what I do know is that people are more divided than ever. And I don't know if it's the Russians are causing it or they're just exacerbating a natural problem, which is the algorithms, whether it's Facebook or Instagram or YouTube, they're tooled to optimize for time on site and engagement. Not necessarily quality time on site or quality engagement. They just want you on the site more to interact with more posts, to serve more ads, to make more money. And what ends up causing more engagement is outrage and arguments and sensationalism. So I don't know if the world is, obviously Steven Pinker and people along his way saying the world's actually never been better as far as statistics. But if you go online, you think the world's never been worse. That might be because we're just being fed more negative information because negative information makes money. Then you have Russian troll farms coming in and just adding fuel to the fire. I don't know what is weighted more in the algorithm, but we're talking about stories and games. We have a bunch of people living, 300 million people living in America. And I think if you took a sample size, so let's say 3,000, right? Make it even numbers. You could probably say 1,500 of them would be on one side, and they would diametrically disagree on what's actually happening. We have more access to information than ever, but we have less of a consensus on what is real and what is actually happening. And games haven't gone too political. I mean, BioShock obviously has like some undertones.
Sure.
But I think the way this connects to games is it's like, people get sucked into a story. Like the way that Suikoden 2 to me is the greatest JRPG of all time. The reason why is I think that the way that it postulates political intrigue and suffering and human suffering and the way society works actually applies to the way, and I'm viewing my life and actual society through some rinky-dink story of a PS1 game, right? If that PS1 game is affecting how I view reality, and that's not even a big part of my life, how are these Russian troll farm pages? I don't even know how to make sense. Honestly, I don't know how to make sense of what's real.
Yeah.
I don't. How does anyone like Trump is such a what's the word, divisive person. I have friends that are pro-Trump. I have friends that think Trump is literally Hitler and everything in between. I listen to both their arguments. The only thing that I know is before he was president, he seemed like a shady sells cars, like used car salesman that got rich. But other than that, like, is he doing a good job running the country? I have no fucking idea. And I've actually spent time trying to figure out.
Yeah.
And I have no idea. And so what story is real? We have 300 million Americans that are believing some sort of narrative.
Yeah.
But I don't know what's real.
I don't know, man.
Sorry to go off on the political tangent.
You're exactly right. And that's that illusion of choice, right? It's that illusion of choice because you get to choose what reality you live in. You know? And what reality you choose, red pill or blue pill, and you take it, then that's your reality. That's your lens for life, right? That's going to govern everything else that you do moving forward. And I think that is stapled within the media that we've consumed, It
is it does freak me out being into digital marketing and basically, I mean, my job essentially is to attract traffic and get that traffic to take some sort of action, buy a product, usually import their information to a form fill or a call as a lead, and then sell that lead to someone that can take action and sell some sort of product and service. And the amount of manipulation that I engage in as a day job, hopefully, like, I'm trying to connect people who, like, I have a lot of lawyers, a lot of plastic surgeons, a lot of orthodontists. I feel good about it because I'm connecting people who, hey, I want plastic surgery or I want braces, and I'm just manipulating them to pick my client versus some other client. That doesn't seem too more like, as long as I believe that my client actually provides a legitimate service, I have no qualms about it. But I'm easily manipulating people online. That kind of freaks me out. Like, okay, how much am I being manipulated online?
Totally.
I do manipulation, and I'm engaged in, or a less negative term would be influence. Manipulation has a negative connotation.
Sure.
Influence. I'm constantly influencing people online to steer them give them the illusion of choice, but I'm really corralling them to take the choice that I want because that choice is going to make me money.
Totally.
And even though I know that, I don't have the ability to differentiate when I'm being influenced. And even when I do realize I'm being influenced, like I see what's going on here, I still can't stop them from influencing me. Like remarketing ads online, like I'll think about something like I kind of want this product, then it'll show up on Instagram, and it keeps showing up. And I'm like, I know what you're doing, but I still want to buy that product.
Yeah.
I can't stop you from making me want to buy that product.
Yeah, it works.
It works.
It works. Yeah, it's a bonkers world. And I mean, if it works at a low level, and what I mean by low level is, hey, anybody can create a Facebook page, anybody can create a Facebook ads account and start running ads, right? Whether that's ads for a product or ads for pushing a specific agenda. If anybody can start doing that, that's great. And it's simple. Imagine the people that have the unlimited funds that can go deeper, like different corporations and things. And that's really what we saw with Cambridge Analytica. They had a lot of the funds. They did manipulate governments. They could do things like that. And if that's happening at that grand of a scale, I mean, you can only imagine. You're influenced everywhere with everything. And it's not even just online. It's in stores. It's everywhere,
We're bombarded. Right?
It's
Constantly bombarded.
Perpetual illusion of choice in which we are beings that are very predictable.
How much do you buy into Project Veritas or Veritas? The sort of anti-Google. I've only came across a handful. You actually linked me one in a text. But there was a video that came out earlier of a female who's a Google exec over the AI saying that they're planning on sort of manipulating search results to influence the 2020 election.
Yeah.
That's as much as I know about. There's that and a couple other links that people have shared with me. I haven't. Is that legit?
It's hard. I mean, it's hard to say. I don't know the credibility of that. I've seen the data dumps. I downloaded the data dumps. I checked through it. I checked through it largely from a marketing perspective, like a Google marketing perspective.
Try to figure out what's going on with the algorithm.
And I've got some theories, which I don't know if they would fit the kind of the scope of this podcast, but I've got a lot of theories on that aspect. In terms of the credibility of the dumps, I'm not sure. But one thing we do know is he had her on camera, at that restaurant, and her saying things. So that's pretty damning.
It is pretty damning.
That aspect's pretty damning of, we don't want to be broken up because little companies don't have the resources to make sure that someone like Trump doesn't ever get in power again. That's a pretty damning statement. Yeah. So,
hey, did you ever read Ender's Game?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I know we're talking about. So that game, the book Ender's Game came out 88, I think 89, maybe 90s.
Yeah.
There's two. So Ender's little brother or older brother and little sister, Valentina, and what's his brother's name? Peter, I think. Remember. So he somehow, Orson Scott Card, props to him, whether you like him or not, props to him. He came up with the idea of the internet before the internet, right? He had this idea of the net. Mm-hmm. And these genius, right? This family had three geniuses: Ender, who was the third child. Actually, he's the youngest. So his older sister and his older brother, they live in this future world where the overpopulation, they don't allow anyone to have children, more than 2 children, unless you get some sort of permission. And anyone that has a third child is called a third, and they're kind of persecuted against. But the reason they let this couple have a third child because they produce geniuses. Their children are really smart. And Ender is the third child, and he gets sent off to battle school because they're at an intergalactic war. But his two siblings stay home. And sort of a secondary story is they use what they call the net at the time, which is interesting that he came up with that. And they manipulate political discourse. They create two fake political personas. Locke and I forget the other. The brother is Locke and the sister is something else. And they are extreme right and left. And they're actually coordinating together, creating division. And these two like teenagers basically take over they take over the political world of influence on the internet by creating fake personas that are extreme right and left and end up swaying elections and actual what ends up happening in this world. That was in the 80s. That's what's happening right now.
Yeah. Man, that's crazy. I don't remember that part.
You don't remember that?
Not that part,
I've been thinking about that a lot lately.
That's crazy. I'm going to have to reread it.
You need to reread it.
Jeez. I read it in 6th grade. It was forever ago. But man, that's bonkers accurate.
It is bonkers accurate. I think he calls it the net. And I know for sure that I forget if the sister's Locke or the brother's Locke. One of like the online personas.
Yeah.
They pretend to be someone that they're not.
Yeah.
And then they start commenting on political stuff.
Man.
And they're actually opposed to each other, but they're working together to sort of sway and move the population and rile them up and get them divisive. And then they get them divided, and okay, we're at this big division. Now we're going to actually work on some sort of bipartisan. And they basically manipulate the government with online tools. Before the internet was really around, he sort of brainstormed this idea. Like he saw where technology was going, and I think that's interesting. That's like it's almost Twilight Zone. Here's this fictional story and narrative, and now it's playing out in real life. Like, is this real life?
Yeah.
Or have you actually heard of that? I know we're going. Sorry if you're into video games. We're going way off from the deeds. Weeds. There's a kid online whose theory is that in 2008, when CERN, I just heard this on Rogan recently, and I looked into it and watched the video. I was like, oh my gosh, it's another rabbit hole. I can't get it. It's probably not true, but it's super fun to go into. That CERN blew up the world, and now we're in an alternate universe. That's why everything's so wacky.
I heard that. Because isn't that where, what does he say? That's where like what's it called when you remember things incorrectly? Like Berenstain Bears versus Berenstain Bears?
Yes, what's that phenomena? Thing? Yeah.
Oh, man.
That was the first one that came out. Yeah. Also Shazam.
Okay.
With Shaq or Sinbad.
Yeah.
And
Kazam, yeah.
Right? So there was a thing that was like, there was a movie called Shazam with Sinbad.
Yeah,
and I was like, yes, I saw that movie for sure when I was a kid. Then I look it up, and apparently that movie's not real. One of the two. It's either Kazam with Shaq or Shazam with Sinbad.
It would have been Shazam because the Shaq one's real.
I thought the Sinbad one was real.
Wasn't the Sinbad one called Sinbad?
There's no either it's Shaq or Shazam, but there's one of them. There's no genie movie with. I think it's Sinbad.
Yeah.
There is no movie with Sinbad.
Really?
But I remember a genie movie with Sinbad.
Yeah. I swear.
And so when I went into this online, I was like, am I in a bizarre world? Because it's like group memory, or there's some term for like.
Yeah.
And the Bernstein Bears was another one that came up.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know.
That crap it throws my head through a loop.
And that actually makes me bring this back to games. Did you ever play Metal Gear Solid 2, Sons of Liberty?
No. I haven't played any.
You haven't played any of the Metal Gears?
I played Metal Gear Solid on a demo disc. That was on the Pizza Hut one.
That was on the Pizza Hut one?
That was on the Pizza Hut one. Yeah. It was Metal Gear Solid. It was
Props to Pizza Hut.
Good marketing, man.
Good marketing.
No, but I've never played an actual full episode. So Crazy.
In Metal Gear Solid 2, there's too much context, but basically they play around with the idea of manipulation, media manipulation, what's real, what's actually good for the population. Like, how much freedom should we really have? And if your goal is a peaceful society with less suffering, human suffering in total, whether that's famine, disease, violence, maybe we should have less freedom. Maybe we should be controlled by AIs. And they kind of get into this whole thing. And there's a section in Metal Gear Solid 2, Sons of Liberty, where the game starts to break down and it gets into this weird fourth wall where you think the game is glitching out, but it's not actually glitching out. It's part of the game. If you haven't played it, you should just either watch some video on it and watch some commentary on it. But Hideo Kojima, who's coming out with a new game called Death Stranding, which is actually coming out pretty soon. Have you watched anything about Death Stranding?
Yeah, with Norman Reedus.
With Norman Reedus?
Yeah, and then that other guy.
Guillermo del Toro, whatever.
Yes.
Sorry, Guillermo, if I'm saying your name wrong. He did Pan's Labyrinth.
Yeah.
And,
yeah.
He did Pan's Labyrinth, yeah. Dude, that movie, by the way, have you seen Pan's Labyrinth?
I didn't understand it. But yes, I have seen it. I watched it when I was in high school.
Yeah, it was a little hard to understand, but I remember the creature with the eyeballs in its hands. Freaked me the fuck out. Oh, boy.
I remember that. I remember the scene where the guard basically punches the guy in the face with the pistol.
Oh, yeah.
Anyway, weird stuff. But yes, I remember that.
So let's dive back into a couple more things before we wrap up. Any more PS1 games that stick out? And then I want to talk about sort of more recent games that have been tickling your fancy.
What about PS2?
Let's go to PS2.
PS2, there's a lot. a lot. Final Fantasy X was a big one.
So you had played 7 and 8, but you hadn't played 9.
Yep, exactly.
And then you went to 10.
Graduated.
What did you think about 10?
I loved 10. What I loved about 10 was... One, I liked the story. I liked the story with Sin.
Yes.
And with all that. It was really, really great. It was like the first RPG that I had ever played in which voice actors were a thing.
Yes.
And so that was a big deal. I really liked the battle system. I liked the battle system, and I liked that when you would summon a GF, then you would control it.
Yes.
You became
that was the first time.
Ifrit,
yes.
or or whatever.
You actually had different commands and different moves and special moves.
They had their
GF.
own health bar. Yeah, exactly.
That's true, because you could keep the GF until its health ran out. Whereas previous Final Fantasies, the GF would just come, do its spell, disappear.
Yep,
it was done.
Exactly. So that was mind blowing.
I loved the concept of Sin and the cycle. Of it coming back, and then they're sending the sorceress. She goes out, sacrifices herself. It appeases Sin for 1,000 years. Then it comes back. That again gave me that sort of. I was old enough to understand that like we don't really know a lot about ancient history. Like we're just sort of picking clues from little things we find. We don't really know.
Sure.
Past like 2,000-3,000 years, we don't know. We don't know shit for shat, right? And so that idea of like, well, maybe there's some like ancient civilizations or the cycle going on, that really stuck out to me. The sorceress sacrificing herself, and that Sin was actually the main character's dad from the future that had been taken. And it's like you get this weird, again, time travel, time loop. And when you beat the game, spoiler alert, you find out that you were never real.
Yeah.
And you were like, once you beat the game, you never existed, and so you sort of fade out of existence. The main character.
Disappear.
But yes, it had voice acting, but the voice acting was atrocious.
It was, sure. It was.
There's that famous scene of Titus laughing that everyone makes fun of.
Yeah.
Like, oh, so bad.
So
and he
good.
wore overalls. What kind of grown-ass man wears overalls?
And like a friggin' blonde pixie cut.
The pixie cut and overalls and a yellow shirt.
Yeah. Everybody always played it not for him. They played him for Oran or for Lulu.
Lulu,
the
hot
black
chick
mage
with belts, big boobs.
Nothing but belts.
I wasn't into like the 500 belts. I wasn't emo.
So many belts.
I did get into emo a little bit. I liked the U's. There was definitely some emo bands that I was into. But the belt look, I just never bought into the belt look.
You weren't the belt. Not 1,100 belts.
Not 1,100 belts. The only thing that saved her is that she was stacked. Again, hey, it might be sexist, but there's a reason they put curvy women's in video games because it sells copies to horny men. I'm sorry, it's capitalism.
Sex sells.
It just sex sells. It does. But again, like it didn't. The only character I thought was cool in that game was Oron, and I think his name's Kamari, like the cat spear.
Oh yeah,
dude.
the spear guy.
Those are the only two that I thought were cool.
Sure.
But the graphics were amazing. Voice acting was new. The CGI, again, another leap, giant leap. I mean, we talked about this in the past podcasts. Really, before like Toy Story and Pixar came about, which is more like a kiddie style, the best CGI was JRPGs. The best cutscenes you could see of pure CGI. The cutting edge was always really the new Final Fantasy game for the most part, as far as Western audiences. Now, like, do you remember Final Fantasy: The Spirits Within, released in theaters? Then before Final Fantasy 15 came out, Kingsglaive. Have you ever seen Final Fantasy 15 Kingsglaive?
No.
To this day, the best motion picture CGI you've ever. It's pure CGI. No, like mixing of real life actors. I don't know why they do that these days. Sometimes
it looks too weird.
It looks too weird.
It's that whole What you said? Kingsglaive.
Kingsglaive.
Is it this Final Fantasy VII one? No, that's Advent Children. That was different. Yeah.
Also has great CGI, even by today's standards.
Yeah, that was good.
Kingsglaive. So the newest Final Fantasy that came out was, I believe, 15. The one with the Noctis. He's the dark hair. He goes on a road trip with his buddies. It's like open world Final Fantasy.
Okay.
It was originally Final Fantasy Versus 13, and then it took 13 years for that game to come out. Before that game came out, they released a feature film just online, and I think maybe in theaters in Japan, like a prequel to the game called Final Fantasy Kingsglaive, 15 Kingsglaive. It's all CGI. The story, it's just like a big hour-and-a-half action scene. But the CGI is like the best CGI to date that I've ever seen. Like there are moments where it passes the uncanny valley, and like this is almost like I could buy this as real.
Sure.
It's just it's right there. It's right there on the verge. And for a long time, like I remember when Final Fantasy X came out, the cutscenes had jumped again. I had never seen cutscenes like that. And a lot of the allure of Final Fantasy games and a lot of JRPGs. Do you ever play Legend of Dragoon on PS1?
I played it a little bit. I never beat it.
Again, great cutscenes, and a lot of the motivation for those early JRPGs was, I want to get to the next cutscene.
Yeah.
I want to get to the next story scene and see this awesome CGI, because you didn't get there was no TV shows with great CGI. There wasn't really any all CGI movies. There was movies like The Abyss or Donnie Darko that had some CGI mixed
elements,
in.
Yeah.
But really, for a long time, it was the JRPGs. That was your... and Final Fantasy X was just another quantum leap in cutscenes.
Totally. It was great. It was great. And then they tried to continue the story with
10-2.
Selling the sex of it all with 10-2.
That was blatant.
It's terrible.
You're going to have all female cast that can dress in a 10,000 scantily clad different outfits.
Yeah.
They had the dress system where like the dress coincided with your class.
Okay.
And you could switch dresses mid-battle. So like Black Mage version, I had this like black sexy dress. Then I want to switch to Red Mage. I changed my dress, and now I have a different dress, and I have different spells.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was pretty blatant.
I just remember the battle system was so different from 10, and I didn't like it.
You didn't like it.
I didn't like it. It was more it was like the hybrid style like battle system where it was like a little action. It wasn't like, because the 10 was a turn-based system, right? Where you'd have all the tiles on the side, and you would be able to see
the next turn who was coming. Yeah, yeah.
And you could totally manipulate that. So, yeah, 10 was a great game. It was phenomenal.
10 was great. What else did you play on PS2?
What else did I play? Man, I'm blanking on PS2 games. Let's see. We played a lot of Splinter Cell. Splinter Cell was a good one. I didn't get super deep in Splinter Cell a little bit. Oh, you want to know a good one? Probably one of the better games, like sandbox games ever. Spider-Man 2.
Wow, you're the first one to bring that up.
Yeah, have you played that one?
I briefly.
Yeah, that one
Briefly.
was great. The mechanics in that game were insane.
That was kind of the first time that they had done web slinging.
Yeah.
Good.
Where it was like connected to buildings or light
Wasn't
posts.
just shooting into the air.
Yeah, it
aimlessly.
wasn't.
Yeah.
Because the first Spider-Man, I remember playing the first Spider-Man on PS1, and it was just shooting into the air. It was just go, right? But Spider-Man 2 was like one of the first big sandbox games that I played that actually felt like the mechanics were insanely well made. So I played a lot of that game. God, I have to jump back to PS1 because this was such a formative game. Parappa the Rapper.
You played a lot of that?
I killed
Yes,
Parappa
that
the
game was
Rapper.
good.
So good.
That was one of those games that started out on me as a demo disc.
Okay.
And then I ended up renting it multiple times.
Yes.
Never bought it, but I rented it at least 3 times, maybe more.
Man, I still remember the raps. To this day, I still remember the raps. It's such a good game.
That is a good game. That is kind of a weird gem. I don't know if you could come out with that game right now.
It was the first Dance Dance Revolution because you're playing with your fingers, right?
Is there a rhythm game before Parappa the Rapper?
I don't think so because they did that. Then they tried to continue it on with Unjammer Lammy or whatever.
Yeah.
And that one sucked and it wasn't as good. And but Parappa the Rapper, man, he was the underdog, literally a dog that you were rooting for because he's getting bullied and everything. Man, that first scene, he's getting bullied, and so he wants to become more like Studley, and so he goes to take karate.
Oh yes,
such a good game.
And the first rap was the karate guy.
Such a good game. Oh man!
And it had that like Paper Mario style where the characters were 2D, flat, but they were over a 3D background.
Yeah.
Yeah, I forgot about Parappa the Rapper.
Yeah,
I can't think of a rhythm game before that. I'm sure there was a game on PS1 that wasn't totally rhythm, but it was forget the name. Another demo disc game that I ended up renting where it would measure your IQ based on you were a little character that had to walk forward and there was cubes walking towards you. It was a puzzle game. Does that ring a bell? Dang, man. A lot of people don't. I've never met someone else that remembers that game, but it was sort of a rhythm game because basically you were on like a straight plane where there were blocks, a set of grids, and they would roll towards you in rhythm. And you had to like smash, kind of like Tetris with rhythm mixed together. That might have predated Parappa the Rapper. That was the PS1 game. Before PS1, was there any sort of rhythm game on Super Nintendo? I can't think of one. That might have been the first rhythm game.
Could be. It's a good game, though.
That was a good game.
It was well made. Good one. I know that's jumping back to PS1. Did you ever play Toomba?
Tuba?
Toomba, Tomba.
Okay, that's bringing 2 things to my mind. That's not the ape guy, right?
He's like a little character. I think he had like pink hair. I think he was shirtless. He's like a wild kid, and you're like going through. It's like a 2D game.
That is bringing back some memories.
It's
a PS1 game, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's a rare game. It's actually worth a lot of money. Like if you go to any of the forums nowadays, just see like what games are being flipped for the most. Toomba's always like into the hundreds. It's a rare game.
Toomba. It's like a platformer, 2D side scroller.
Yep, totally. Bizarre game. Super fun though. I remember.
I'm thinking of Toki.
Yeah, I don't know.
Toki was a 2D game on Genesis and maybe Super Nintendo where you're an ape that can shoot bullets out of his mouth. Really weird game as well.
Weird.
But Toomba, I am conjuring up the cover art in my mind. He's got pink hair.
Yep. Totally.
Yeah. I think I saw that game but never played it.
Got it.
Did you ever play any of the Twisted Metals?
A little bit with friends. I never had Twisted Metals, but I loved playing them with friends. It's a great game.
I can't believe you never played any of the Metal Gears.
No, man.
And that's like a massive franchise.
Yeah. Well, I have kind of been an outlier with a lot of really key games. So Metal Gears I haven't really played, and I haven't really played Zelda.
That's another crazy one that most people have gotten into Zelda.
Yeah.
Well, you never owned a 64, right? Yeah. Because Ocarina of Time for the guys and girls our age is one of the most formative games.
Totally.
But that's interesting. So you never got into that.
No, I did get into Metroid, and I've found that people get into either Zelda or Metroid if they're like start with SNES, and I was more the Metroid side. So Super Metroid was huge for me. But never a Zelda. Never Zelda.
Did you play the Metroids on GameCube?
I did.
The Prime trilogy?
I did.
Those are pretty good. I only played the first one. I played them later on emulator. Speaking of the Dolphin emulator, so solid.
Is it?
So solid.
Nice.
It's good. You can play, and they also have CMU, which is the Wii U emulator, and you can play Breath of the Wild 4K 60 FPS now on CMU.
Holy cow.
So if you haven't played Breath of the Wild, now's the time to get into it.
I'll have to check it out for sure.
Well, let's wrap it up. You got so you playing some phone games lately? You playing some emulators?
Not really phone game. I mean, honestly, that was a shit answer. Really, it's just to keep the kids entertained, stuff like that. It's not actually gaming. When I'm gaming, I'll revisit BioShock every once in a while. That's typically, or I'll phone game in terms of Chrono Trigger. I've also got like the Final Fantasy VII on my phone. So that's about it.
Do you, is there any way that you can articulate gaming impacting your professional life directly, if you had to think about it?
Probably.
Because the way that I think about it, my answer would be, so what ends up happening when you play a game, you're giving, like, they create a world and there's rules and there's systems and there's mechanics for that game. For example, we talked about Fable. All right, you had this open world. I want to figure out, like, how is the game? Are the NPCs going to remember if I murder their whole family and then marry her? She's going to remember if I reset the game. You're sort of manipulating the rules that govern the game universe.
Yeah.
That's how I feel marketing. Like
Totally.
that skill set, sometimes I think it makes sense that I ended up getting into marketing because I grew up manipulating like little ecosystems
Yeah.
for my profit in the game.
Yeah.
And now I'm manipulating an algorithm and ecosystem, whether that's an advertising ecosystem on Google. Obviously, SEO is a big part of what we do and what I came up doing, which is totally manipulating the algorithm that decides what to rank. And so I think that it's not direct, but that skill set of like poking around and figuring out what works, where are the boundaries, where are the shortcuts that are the best, where are the shortcuts that are going to hurt you.
Yeah.
I think I learned some of that skill from gaming, some of that like
Totally.
logistical process of like exploring, figuring out what are the rules and how can I use the rules to my advantage.
Totally. I would say something very similar. I wish it was something more complex, like, oh yeah, like I wanted to be able to create stories to craft perception. It's some shit like that.
Yeah.
No. Probably I think really what it was is I think it's the gamification aspect,
Yeah.
right? Where I think it's probably exactly like what you said, right? Where you play a game, and when you're playing a game, you're, like you said, trying to push boundaries or trying to just win ultimately, right? Win for whatever gain that is, right? So like in Final Fantasy, for instance, I remember Final Fantasy X spending so much extra time before going to Battle Sin in order to acquire every single one of the most powerful weapons.
Yes.
And they all had their crazy side quests.
Mm-hmm.
And so doing all of those things were fulfilling because you're seeing how far you can push it, but you're seeing also just how just super powered you can make your characters, right? So it's just that systematic, here's a problem, how can I fix it, right? And I think that then ported over easily to marketing and businesses in general, because it's always a new challenge. How can I blow down this barrier? And how can I progress to the next stage? It's fun. It's a gamification, right? Instead of a career trajectory that is more along the lines of, okay, I'm going to get into this career because it pays well and I'm just going to do the same thing over and over. No. That was hell in my mind. It still is hell in my mind. But something that it's like, okay, the challenges are always different. Things are always going to be changing. And how can I turn this into a game? How can I make it fun, right? What's the next step? What's the safe havens, the checkpoints? And then how can you
It's
progress?
almost as if through gaming, you learn to associate gamification, which is really a rudimentary way of what's the word? It's like it's a blunt way to illustrate life, because life is a little bit of a game, but
Sure.
the boundaries are sort of infinite. We don't really know what reality is, right? But you associate positive emotions with problem solving and gamification.
Yeah.
Which makes it maybe marketing's not such a grind. You're sitting in front of a screen and you're trying to figure out how to play within the rule set and win, which is the same thing that comes with games. And maybe that's why I've thought about something. Maybe that's why I can sit in front of a computer and try to do all this marketing stuff and not go crazy, because I was trained to sit in front of a TV screen figuring out rule sets. Yet the stories, the narrative's not really in place, but if you're trying to do something online, you're having to, like I said, create a narrative. All right, I'm going to drive this traffic based on this targeting and this keywords. What are they looking for? What is their intent? I've got to drive them to this page. Now I got to tell them a story. That's only half the battle. Now I got to get them to like influence and then take some sort of action. Buy the product, input the email, fill out the form, call the number. I think if you play games and you're looking for a job, maybe you should get into marketing. It definitely worked for me, because I tried a bunch of things. I didn't know what I was going to do with my life. I tried being a rock star, tried being a drummer, tried a record label, and marketing is what ended up working out for me. And it's obviously what's worked out for you too.
Yeah, totally. I mean, it even can be so rudimentary as like when you're playing Mario Brothers, you're playing Mario 3, right? And in order to beat the level, you need to get the leaf, right?
Yep.
And then you get the leaf and you run fast and then you can fly, right? Well, the leaf's just a tool to help you beat it. There's ways you can beat it without getting the leaf, right?
You don't have to get the leaf,
right.
Yes.
But it'll give you the edge so that you can find different secrets.
And that's how real life
get more
works.
coins. Exactly. And so you're always looking for, hey, what's the other lever I can pull, right? That's going to give me an edge over the competitors. It's going to pull more people onto my site or my client's sites. And so it's just that gamification, right? It's making it fun, right? Problem solving.
Yep. Well, so there you go, parents. Video games don't ruin lives. They prepare you. They prepare you to be professional marketers or, I don't know, successful people. I wonder that about my kids. How am I going to... I mean, I don't know if they're going to be into games or not. I obviously want them to be into games so we can connect over that. But am I going to worry about... Like, I do worry about how much TV my kids watch. This is something I want to ask. If my kids sat in front of a TV show for 4 hours versus playing a game for 4 hours, I would be more worried about the TV show. Would you feel the same way? I don't know if that's just me being biased because I like games.
Probably. I mean, I think that decision-making component is there, and I think that's crucial. I think that helps you, hone your brain. But I also think like the reflexes and everything too. I don't know. Growing up, did you have really good reflexes? I had phenomenal reflexes from playing video games.
I think so. I mean, most kids grew up. I don't know. Like I think I'm not incredibly athletically gifted when it comes to maybe going like tricks inverted. I would go snowboarding with friends that were ninjas, right? They would hit the rail and do this trick. They would try 3 or 4 times and land it. I would try 60 times and land it and get hurt 10 times in the process. But on the flip side, when it comes to grappling and jiu-jitsu, I picked it up really, really quick. And I've wondered that. Does that come from gaming? Like maybe the sort of that hand-eye coordination and tactical? Because a lot of grappling, like I think of Final Fantasy Tactics, right? I have certain characters, they have certain abilities. There's really only so many things you can do. They have their counterattacks. I have my attacks. That's a little bit like grappling. I'm in this position. There's only 5 to 10 things they can do. There's only 5 to 10 things I can do. If they do this, then I respond with that. Sometimes I do connect some of that. I don't know how much of it's hand-eye coordination. I don't know. That's a good question. Do I have more coordination from gaming? I'm sure it doesn't hurt your coordination at the very least. There's no way it could hurt your coordination. Totally. Because you're looking at a screen, you're coordinating movements with your hands.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's obviously it's probably not good to sit in front of a TV screen all day.
Yeah.
But if I had to choose between my kid, again, because a game is going to give them the same narrative sort of influences that a TV show with the added part of problem solving.
Right.
Whereas on a TV show, you're sort of just checking out and just being taken for a ride, which could be good in its own right, de-stressing, escaping. But you're not developing any problem solving skills. Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah. Well, if you guys want any sort of marketing done, Josh Moody's the man. I will put I don't know do you have like a page or a website for your services that we can shout out?
Yeah, you can, if you just go to joshuamoody.com, it will redirect to my LinkedIn page. You can connect with me there. That's probably the easiest way.
Easy way to do it.
Totally.
We'll put those links in the podcast. We'll do an intro and outro for him. Thanks for listening. Thanks for coming down, man.
Thank you.
He's here for a fancy business getaway because he does fancy business stuff and he's the shit at marketing. So if you need marketing, whether it's you need services, or you just want a consultation or want to pick someone's brain, joshuamoody.com. Anything online marketing, he's a great resource. Hit him up. If he can't do anything for you, he can redirect you to someone that can help you.
Thank you.
All right, man. Talk to you guys later. Peace.
Alrighty then, you have finished the podcast. This was actually one of my favorite ones. I really, really enjoyed this podcast. Time flew by when we were talking. So shout out to Joshua motherfucking Moody for coming onto the podcast. He's a badass. Check him out. Next week, we have another badass. Look, all I do is interview badasses because that's what the gaming gods told me to do. It's revelation. It's going to work out. It's going to be the best gaming podcast on motherfucking planet Earth. Igama. Igama is a badass producer, another music producer. He's basically traveled all over the world, makes really chill, ambient, headphone-esque music. When I mean headphone music, I mean like really detailed, intricate, chill shit. Artistic shit. And he comes onto the podcast next week. He even brought in the new Prophet 6, like the remade, improved Prophet 6 synth. If you don't know what the Prophet 6 is, it's like a just super legendary synth, and they released kind of like a remaster HD updated version of it, and he snagged one and we played with it, and my god, the knobs feel amazing. The filters, it has like this distortion filter on it that is some of the coolest distortion. Which is basically every patch that we made, the first thing I did is I'm going to fuck with that distortion knob because I love that distortion. Anyway, he has great musical taste, makes great beats, and no surprise here, another music producer that's into music. He will be on next week. Until then, make sure to spread the good news of the Gaming Memories Gospel. I was joking in the intro of this episode, but I actually am going to make a Patreon. And if you really do want to pay me 10% of your income before tax, gotta add that in before tax, I'll be super happy. I don't know how it's actually gonna work, but maybe I will have like behind the scenes extras, uncut versions of shit, things that can add to the Patreon, just basically because look, podcasts are dope, but it's gotta make some money because I got kids and shit. I gotta make money. Actually, I really don't need to make money, but if I could, then and if you like my bullshit enough, then why would I not give you an avenue to waste your money and give it to me? So I'm going to do that. Until then, spread the good news of the Gaming Memories Gospel. Do your missionary work. Tell people about it. Like, share, comment, whatever. Next week, Igama, music producer extraordinaire. Peace.